you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
Should
this.
the human race survive?
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant. Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, June 27th, 2025. Thank you so much for joining me today. Important follow-ups. Every day it seems like there's something that's adding to a previous story. Never stops. And today I think it's really important to highlight some things like the Garcia case that have really fallen behind in a lot of the coverage. I mean, from everybody's. There's a lot of really important and crazy things happening in the world. But as I said before, around the constitutional issues, and still to this very moment, what's happening around all of this, the immigration conversation, Garcia, Khalil, Ozturk, and many, many other names that we don't even know. It is one of the most important things happening in this country because of the very clear implications of where it's going. And as this story continues to evolve, what we've already talked about with the very well done drop site news coverage of Bukele and the secret deal with MS-13 has now basically become mainstream coverage. And it's really important to highlight today the quiet Trump administration effort to just drop all of the charges against these MS-13 leaders. Of course, not Garcia, though, because he's not actually one of the leaders or even part of the gang as far as the evidence shows. But all the others who may just have a lot to say about the deal with Bukele are now being pardoned and allowed, or rather just dropping charges and allowed to be. I mean, there's a nuance around where they're going after this, but I'm imagining back to El Salvador where they have agreements with Bukele to not be held accountable and really to make it appear as if there's no crime going on. Now, we've gone over this. That sounds shocking to you. You're going to want to tune in because this is not new information. And it's just really coming out more obviously, explicitly around the main discussion of going after MS-13 or whether the reality of what that is and what they're really focusing on. All these claims about these gangs, and it turns out that really their focal point is simply people that are easiest while using the claim of MS-13 to go after them when in fact you seem to be avoiding them entirely. It's a really horrifying reality to see what, it's nothing new for those that follow power in general. This is what governments do. I'm not trying to be so blithe and sort of pessimistic about it. It is just what they are. It's history. It shows you that. We should always hope for something better, but be honest with ourselves about what these people have always been. And it's sadly nothing new. But we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. I mean, really, I mean, almost every one of my shows, I fail to really encapsulate everything we're going to discuss in the beginning of the show, and I'll maybe start doing a better job about that. The point I'm doing it today is there was quite a few things that I think are really important that we're going to go over today. We're going to start with a point about Trump Mobile, which, surprise, surprise, it turns out it wasn't actually made in the United States, or at least that's what they're demonstrating with their current actions, which won't surprise me. An interesting overlap to that point about some new thing called MAGA beer, which just so funny how easy it is to manipulate people in the partisan field today on both sides. We're going to talk about vaccines, platforms around it, the conversation of a malaria point, say the same conversation through this current administration and the hypocrisy therein, but just also the large issue about where all these things go, overlapping with that, AI, wearables, Palantir, and where this overlaps with the current immigration discussion, and from that, discussing Garcia, the many updates around that case, but also some really shocking stuff that we haven't talked about in the last week. Some of the kind of standout, and understand it is like it's 1% of the cases we could show you, but the leading standout cases of the things that you probably don't know were happening. Veterans having their wives detained and potentially deported, things that would shock you that are not new, but under the guise that is this America First administration going after the worst among you, and in many cases turns out to be the weakest, least threatening, in many cases, people that are MAGA supporters, people that are Trump supporters, people that are veterans, people who have, we'll go over it. Horrible realities of what they're actually doing and the evidence to back it up. We're going to talk about the Bukele MS-13 connection as that pertains to that very conversation, and ICE and what they're doing through all of that. We're going to talk about the deportation conversation along with that, and of course, Israel, Gaza, which is still happening, of course. We're going to talk about that, but Israel's overlapping connections to that, to what's going on with Iran, the false ceasefire, the potential false flag that many reports are now claiming was stopped. And we'll get into maybe why that was, and being skeptical of all of this. It's certainly possible that claim itself is a manipulation, but we have to know and understand how often and how easy it is to see the reality of whether or not they do these things, have done them, are capable of doing them. The answer is yes, clearly. And what we're being told now lines up with a lot that's been backed up before and information that we already heard, the writing on the wall, let's put it that way before we get into it all, about what we heard from people in the Israeli government, people that heard about things they knew were coming, and going over all of what that shows in the context of what happened. The lying about what happened with the bombings, the lying about how it started. And everyone seems to see through it right now. And the kind of pretend ceasefire, Israel claiming they've won already in a very embarrassing way, and clearly not actually stopping, despite even the claim today of ceasefire. And we'll go through it all. Now, even discussing Iran alone, which I'm completely convinced is not even remotely stopping, other than slowing down a bit, but in the same moment, they're starting to bomb Lebanon again. They're starting to bomb Gaza even more than ever. They're starting to create new angles towards Pakistan. You need to understand that this is not for 1 second stopping. They're not going to let it stop. And meaning the power structures are interested in this, and it very well could just mean the U.S. government as well. Only reason I frame it that way is the wonder of who's actually driving this bus, and whether the U.S. government, Trump, the rest of them are even actually, whether they know it or not, actually in control of anything that's happening. And that's not about a left or right dynamic, guys. We're going to actually start with a point about this around Israel influence and a claim from people in, one point close to Trump, now not, which seems to be an everyday matter with people that are in his inner circle. One day you're his best friend, the next you're hated, and vice versa. But saying that Trump is actually taking direction from a foreign power. But I'll leave it hang there. We'll get to it in a second, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the false flag, false ceasefires, avoiding jail as Netanyahu, using war to stop himself from going to prison. All of it very important stuff to discuss today. But I'll start with the article here. We recently discussed Trump Mobile. I always say that, the show, but the article on the website of the show, Trump's leaked AI government plans, Trump Mobile, and the expected false flag to justify Iran war. Now, that was actually in regard to the discussion of the Nimitz and how that might play out, which is relevant to the other point. We'll come back to that. But just to leave this in the show notes for you, which will always be included at the end after we're done on the TLAV website link. As always, you'll see all of them included all down below with literally every single thing that we point to, talk about, reference for you. Whoops, hit back accidentally. For you to, I don't know how I just did that. This one here. For you to go through and look, reference, bookmark, investigate, like we always should be doing with everything we're dealing with. Now, not everyone has time to look into everything and research everything, and that's okay. The point is that if you have not, then don't pretend or exhibit or demonstrate or, claim to to understand the dynamics, or to, people will listen to some corporate media or some independent media, mainstream alternative, and then regurgitate that as if it's absolute fact. The point is, unless you do your due diligence, just the responsible thing would be to discuss these things as, passing information we don't know for sure. The problem is we all know that's not how the partisan field works. I'm of the mind that most of you out there are like this by default because you're not ridiculous. But the mainstream, the partisan fields, it's crazy. Now, on that very note, this is something we talked about recently. It's a smaller point. Really, when you think about it, it's not really a small point when it comes to the situation, the conversation of honesty and whether or not these people even care that you'll notice they're deceiving you, or that they'll use things that they know you hold very dear to try to manipulate you into things like the previous MAGA phone that Eric Prince rolled out that was made in Israel, connected to the NSO group, that just very quickly went into the background because that's insane. And they lied to you about it. Like, they also claimed those things were, America first. Well, this came out. Trump Mobile quietly removes Made in the USA promise from its webpage after being accused of sourcing from China. Now, it's just the quiet move like this is very telling to me. But I want you guys to think about not only whether they would lie to you about this and what that might mean, but ask yourself whether there is a deeper point to why this might be whether, the Eric Prince MAGA phone and now to this. What's the interest here? Is it just making money? Maybe. And would they lie to you about what you care about to make money? Sure, they would. But I'm wondering whether there's something deeper. And I'll leave it there because I don't know about whether there's more infiltration happening here with foreign governments. If you think it's China, then consider that. I very clearly think Israel's the most obvious culprit, but I would never dismiss the possibility of China, amongst others, trying to do that. And you'll see that as we go through this first part. At first, Trump Mobile quietly removed its Made in America, Made in USA claim from its website after facing accusations that they sourced parts from China, initially marketing them as proudly designed and built in the United States. I'm surprised. Let's just say it turns out it wasn't made in the United States. Can't you just stand back and go like, they must have expected somebody because of all the hate back and forth to go like, well, I'm going to check that. It just seems like an interestingly flimsy thing to do if it does turn out to be that it's absolutely not made in the United States, or that they were, buying China parts and then putting them together in the United States, whatever it is. It either seems to be very naive, or that maybe it is all, maybe there is somebody trying to attack them. And it's really, I just think it's interesting to consider, if that is the case, why in the world they would have allowed that. But the reason I'm saying that is we've seen 50 examples in the last, so many months of them doing stuff like that, making moves that you just go, how in the world would they have not have thought that through? And somehow they don't. After criticism, including CNN tech analyst Mark Weinbach, noting that only a handful of smartphones, and it was well more than him, plenty of people were looking at the background, where these parts come from, all the different industry and entities, and seemingly argument being it wasn't possible to do what they claimed they could with where they claimed it came from. And it says that only a handful of smartphone manufacturers could produce the devices, and that they are all based in China. That's the only way they were able to meet a certain price point. And this phone was being claimed to be like hundreds of dollars less. It just didn't seem to make sense. And it says the company quietly removed, after this comment, all of its Made in the USA claims from its website. Maybe they're trying to trap them. Maybe it's all a secret ploy to draw them in, to be like, see, we told you, but it seems like a lot of effort for nothing. You know where my mind goes with this. I think it's quite obvious where the logical, Occam's razor. It seems as if they were caught in a lie, is what it appears to me, including a prominent banner, according to The Verge. Just the banner, they had everything Made in USA, has been taken down. The Verge also noted the company appears to have switched suppliers. Now, that may be the whole point. So they were going from somebody else. Take down the banner, find something else. And then, when it comes to pass, it's not technically the problem, but they're not claiming USA either. But something did switch up here. As the screen size shrank, the website previously listed different sizes, different RAM, but the detail that has been removed, that detail has now been removed. Additionally, the shipping date for the T1 phone was changed from September to later this year. So clearly, my gut, obviously, they got caught. They got caught trying to pretend, and now they're trying to backwardly wrap it up without us noticing, trying to find how much you want to bet it's going to end up being the price that's more equivalent to the rest of them, and some kind of a sidestep of the real picture of America. That's what I'm getting the sense of. But the reason I won't include it is because we're lied to about everything, guys. And they will use what you care about. Your belief in this country, your belief to make this country great again. And these people, if they're willing to use things like that in any context, left or right, it really has to show you that they don't really care about those things. That's why I thought that was relevant. Now, on another side note, just happened to see this today. I thought, well, it's an interesting, segue from what we were just talking about. This is from the 20th. MAGA beer doesn't have a really big following on Twitter right now, but I saw a lot of big accounts pointing to it. And it says Friday night lights, backyard barbecues, cold beer on a tailgate. We're not launching. How be fun? Wouldn't it be hilarious if this was, made by a bunch of Democrats just trying to make money? My point would be that it's just people that they might perceive as being something that's not them. It's people will throw at you what you want to hear to make money, guys. It shouldn't be that shocking, or maybe they believe in all these things. I just think it's worth considering that. MAGA beer for Americans, the America you remember. And this major 500,000 follower account simply says, breaking, new America First beer set to hit the shelves in July. Its name, MAGA beer. Breaking after 75 other people have already screamed it online, but that's how that kind of goes today with this field. But this person made a joke that I think is funny. It's MAGA beer because it's made in Israel, which is just kind of what made me thinking about that. That's a joke, to be honest, or unless he knows something we don't. But it would kind of be spot on, wouldn't it? Or somebody else said MAGA beer because it's, sold out to Israel or something like that. I simply asked on here where it was made, seeing if Grok had any insight. It said MAGA beer is described as being bottled and canned in the USA. However, the specific brewery or facility where it's produced is not detailed in the site. Oh, seems similar to the MAGA phone direction. However, posts of people on Twitter are mentioning that the people involved or rather the people, the post about it, about people who were involved, Jared and Joshua Finkelstein as the creators, described them as entrepreneurs and partners, but this information is inconclusive without further verification. So it's developing. So I wasn't able to find any real direction based on that, but interesting to see where it comes back to see who is trying to maximize or, profit off of the MAGA momentum and whether or not they really believe in it. So you can find out for yourself. But I thought that was interesting. And here's the actual website, MAGA Beer, coming soon with very, very little information. So that is just an interesting point I thought was, interesting, kick off the show, interesting talk about, we'll keep an eye on it, see where it comes back to. But overall, it's really about the idea of, whether it's advertisers, whether it's lobbyists, whether it's foreign governments. We need to be let me start with this, actually. We all know both sides seem to have their guard up against something. The left, at least at one point, was like Russia's and all over our country. And then for the right, it was all about China. And weirdly, both now seem to not really be discussed as much as they were before, which I kind of find telling that neither partisan side seems to want to really even discuss the idea of outside influence. I think that tells you something now that it's never been this obvious. But it's interesting to think about. My point being, of course, they're able to consider how a foreign country could influence, control, maybe even dictate the outcome of a presidency, right? But then when you start talking about, not even saying we know for sure, but what about that country? And it's like, that's not possible. How dare you? Pearl clutching kind of stuff you get from both sides. Doesn't that seem ridiculous? And so obviously, you know my opinion. I'm not just trying to jam in what I will always consider. If you have evidence, if you think China's doing that, I'm willing to bet you anything they're all doing so in some degree, to some degree. But when it comes to Israel, it's very clear that this is the problem of our time, and it's on the surface right now, which is why I'm talking about it, in my opinion anyway. Now, going back to 9/11, so if we're, let's be aware, we shouldn't have to be sidestepping the reality of Israel's involvement in 9/11 and the understanding of what happened, or going back to the USS Liberty. I'm not going to play the clip. This point right now is about how a lot of these major MAGA America First fake entities are screaming about, basically showing you that this part's about 9/11. Weirdly enough, obviously not at the time when it matters for everybody, trying to reassert the false narrative of 9/11. 24 years ago, Charlie Kirk says, a group of Muslims killed 2,753 people on 9/11. Now a Muslim socialist is on pace to run for New York City. And which he won, apparently. I'll touch on it in a minute. I wasn't even going to get into it because I honestly don't want to support any politician at this point. But the interesting point of him being very pro-Palestine and everyone trying to call him to the point where they're trying to call for his citizenship to be revoked. That's not a joke. It just shows you how gross and completely lost the plot a lot of these people have gotten, and mostly because I think they just have an agenda. My point, though, is that the information around something like the USS Liberty or 9/11, guys, it's just striking. If you haven't taken the time, that's why I point to James Corbett's work and plenty of others. It's not like a hyperbolic, hypothetical. It's the receipts, guys. We know these things. This is not a secret, okay? And even more than anything, the USS Liberty, especially since we can speak to people that were literally there, the veterans who were there, who tell you that they saw Israel, they knew it was Israel, that on and on and on. People like Joe Meters, who even got arrested by Israel from the Freedom Flotilla and held there for months, and the U.S. government didn't care. They will tell you that they know Israel attacked them, that they know their government covered it up to this very day. And my point is, all of this, people like Kirk will shout you down. That's the video here of people asking about that, saying, that's not true, you're a liar. Okay, the only two ways you can look at this is people like Kirk or Betty Johnson, or the rest we're going to point to, are either that bad at their jobs or are lying to you for one reason or another. I don't know what else to think about it. You can decide for yourself. So this is what we're getting all of a sudden. You must understand why. I'm willing to bet you anything that at some point we're going to get this fold back in about how Iran was somehow involved in 9/11, despite how that has been one of the most debunked parts of that whole story. And they really, really wanted you to think it was Iran in the early parts of the conversation. You obviously see why, don't you? The point is, Charlie Kirk on the 24th of June says this 24 years ago, a group of Muslims killed. It's just not what happened. And I'm not going to go into the dynamics of what happened on 9/11. We've done it ad nauseum on this show, like a lot of us have over the years. That's not the reality. Okay, there was multiple factors involved, including your government, including Israel, and including whatever we want to call the people that were involved, whether Mossad assets or people that were, let's understand, Palestinians, Iranians, like we touch on briefly today, there are people all over the world that are assets for Mossad, just like they are for the CIA, that they will use and blame it on certain people. Like we have the Shah, for example, these people they're rushing out, or the supposed the grandson of the Hamas member they trot out every 30 seconds to say the most extreme things that literally got caught in the interview with Pierce and the, what's his name? The Young Turk guy, where the Hamas son guy literally got caught threatening American politicians. It's just insane. Anyway, the point is, this is ridiculous. Now a Muslim socialist. Now he's going after an American citizen, by the way, who happens to be a Muslim, who just has the wrong ideas, according to Kirk. And so Dr. Simon Godek says, hey, Charlie, since you claim to stand for the truth, why are you still pushing the official 9/11 fairy tale and dismissing Israel's attack on the USS Liberty as a conspiracy theory, even though 34 American servicemen were killed? Many of the ones alive still tell you to this day that that's what happened. Be honest, are you MAGA or MAGA? Make Israel great again. You know the reality of this guy. I'm not saying I know his mindset, but the reality is he's not stupid enough. I mean, you could decide that, to think that this is the reality. The evidence is very clear. So why is he pushing this lie now all of a sudden? Or first, off guard, he makes the excellent point, pointing to Charlie Kirk, nearly 24 years later, this opinion is still a litmus test for intellectual dishonesty. Same thing that Ken O'Keefe pointed out a long time ago. He said 9/11 is a litmus test for truth, for honesty, for people that are real. And he says nobody who actually studies the facts can actually believe this is true. Then I will stand by, like, me, I rarely will say something absolute, unless it's in passing and sort of like a statement, hyperbolic statements or phrases. My point is, when I'm talking about something explicitly, directly, you rarely hear me say proof, right? In this case, I absolutely stand by that statement. Nobody who actually studies these facts can believe what he's saying right there. Now, you can dispute what we have, what you believe the real thing is, because there's plenty of nuanced ideas in it. But to claim that and look at the fact, it's just insane, guys. You're a grifter. You're a liar. And it says anybody repeating it is outing themselves as either an establishment shill or uninformed idiot or a moral coward. Exactly agree with that. On that note, actually, sorry, I forgot. I found these as we were going forward. I'm jumping next to the next person we're going to talk about, but this, Kevork Almacian makes an excellent point about this. Here, Charlie Kirk again, saying, basically he's super pro-Trump, right? So he's saying Muslims attack the country. Okay. Kevork Almacian says 24 years later, your president shook hands with the man who pledged allegiance to al-Zawahiri, excuse me. I think that was... Anyway, I was thinking it was a different name. Founded Al-Qaeda's Syrian branch and helped topple the secular government in Damascus. We're talking about Jelani, right there, with direct U.S. backing. Thank you for your attention on this matter. The point is, that's just blatant intellectual dishonesty. So you're okay, right, with him literally shaking hands, making deals with the very person that you are currently, like you're saying, look at what happened on 9/11. And here he is shaking the hands with the people you want to believe, you want us to believe are involved. You don't think he can piece that together? No, it's because Israel wanted that person there, because Israel's the one that creates these illusions, this illusory dynamic of the Muslims attacking everybody. It's obvious. I mean, we've gone over this so many times, it's painful. And the reality is the evidence is always striking. Now, since we have time today, I'm not in a rush. I'm going to play this really quickly because it's relevant. This academic has spoken about this many times.
The Zionists have used it and brought it, in fact, to the area. Terrorism, as we know it today, the planting of bombs in marketplaces and so on and so forth, was, in fact, introduced into the Middle East by the Zionists in the 1920s. But the net result of Zionist terrorism and violence in the first third of the 20th century has brought forth, to my mind, the anomaly, the horrific and unacceptable status in the Middle East today of the State of Israel, which is in fact an armed garrison state, which now exports more arms and distributes violence all around the world, vastly disproportionate to its size. I mean, in that respect, I think it's a horrible cycle of violence. But in it all, I think the Palestinian is the victim. There's no question about that.
Indeed. And here he is shaking the hands of the very person that they had a bounty on for being a terrorist. You almost have to laugh at how stupid that is if it wasn't so alarming. Well, same point here. And weirdly enough, right about the same 24-hour period that they all did the same thing. Totally just organic, though, isn't it, guys? Johnson comes out, Benny Johnson, and says, New York City in 2001, we'll never forget. New York City in 2025 elects Muslim jihadist. Like, I mean, we're at a level where this is actually, I mean, what's the best way to even frame this without being, I just don't want people to think it's like we hate these people or it's about left versus right. It's really not. And you guys know that if you watch the show. To acknowledge from an objective perspective that you have a person who presents themselves as this journalist or whatever you want to call it, a reporter, and to point at an American citizen who in no way, in any way, shape, or form has ever claimed to be acknowledged or in any evidence to the effect that he is a jihadist or part of a terrorist organization. In fact, he just supports Palestine. And I'm sure they have their criticisms of what all Muslims are or X, Y, and Z or groups he might be tied to. The facts are to say, what happened to libel? What happened to slander? The idea that you can just literally call someone a jihadist, a terrorist, because you disagree with his policy. You're an infant, Benny. You're a child in the conversation for screaming the thing. This is partisan political propaganda. And frankly, I think you know where this stems back from. I just find this to be, it's disgusting. This is the problem with, then what do you think the world looks at us when they think that's the high level conversation? Because that's how the fields and the Twitters, that's how they present it to the world. But that's not how most Americans think, in my opinion. I simply said, well, this universally, this universal push by the Jones, Johnson, Kirk types to go back to square one 9/11 lies is not just transparent, it's expected. Are some seriously still pretending this is what happened on 9/11? Or is Benny just not good at his job? I genuinely want you guys to think about this because it's everywhere. Now, interesting overlap to this is you've got the people like the Tucker, Marjorie Taylor Greene dynamic, where, is my opinion and the history and how long they might as well be the exact same thing, except there's been a deviation lately around Iran and Israel, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Now, there's few ways to look at it. It could be the worry that these are the ones trying to jump ahead of the next narrative, almost designed by the very people, almost, with the allowance of people we may be talking about in order to gain your trust for the next lie. That's always something to consider. Don't assume ever, but consider. Or these are people that genuinely are not okay with Iran, a war with Iran. And maybe they're very much partisan manipulators who will lie through their teeth for any reason, but don't want this country to be taken over by a foreign government. These things, there's many factors to all of this. So just consider that, right? It's what the problem with these very big stories, like with COVID-19, it's a perfect example. It becomes like this, like we said, like a lone litmus test. Well, they don't like the jab, so they're on my side, and that's a dangerous way to look at everything. And so every time they use these stories, especially after we're well past the hump, right? Like with COVID. All of a sudden, it became all these people that sidled up next to those that had it right from the beginning and gained a lot of clout, like people we're pointing to right now. Or, there's a lot of examples of that. And so the worry is that may be, in a way, kind of how this is playing out the same way. But let's listen to this clip. Glenn Greenwald says, talking to Tucker, Marjorie Taylor Greene explains why she rejects the overwhelming consensus in the U.S. government. Israel is a priority over the United States. So it's really, regardless of the intention, this is what I'm always talking about. I think that's obviously right. Even and especially when you know that I do not trust these people, I'm still going to point at what they say and go, yes, that is correct, even if they're using it as opportunism. Right? Just don't blindly trust any of them, and that's not a problem. And so my point is for them to say out loud that these people, the majority of Congress, thinks Israel's a priority over the United States. That's an important thing to say out loud. But what it shows you is they know that you all see it. They know that everybody sees this. And so they're trying to, maybe they believe it. That's also possible, but I get the sense they're trying to warp this back into a controllable situation. It's worth considering. But I do think it's important to point out that that's being called out. And that means the majority of people in the MAGA movement in politics, you understand. I think that's self-evident at this point. Here's the clip.
Happened to you, Marjorie Taylor Greene? I was reliably informed that you were a right-wing extremist. And now I'm hearing from Mark Levin and others that you're a liberal.
Yeah, I think that's what they're saying.
So you've gotten pretty liberal?
No.
And just note, by the way, guys, this is what people like us have been dealing with, or like David Icke, for a decade. where every major story, it oscillates around us because our principles stay the same, and you get called left one day and right the other. It's not new. The point is now either they're allowing themselves to be pulled into that for like I'm talking about, or maybe they're finally finding themselves in it. Worth considering, but it's not new in any way, shape, or form. Ah, damn it.
You're saying that,
So you've gotten pretty liberal?
no,
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 you haven't.
no, not one bit.
But you are saying things that I've never heard you say before. Of course, we're in a different moment. We're in a moment where, a lot of things that I'll speak for myself that I had zero interest in ever talking about got kind of forced on us.
Yeah, not what really. I mean, you pick the topic and you tell me that it just popped up yesterday. It's been a year. No, guys, these stories, everyone that he might be broadly referring to right there, have been going on for decades. And you know that because we've all been screaming about it. So even that framing, like this is some new thing, I just screams dishonesty to me. You know my opinion.
Because of the wild, unbridled aggression of a few ideologues in Washington, kind of like you just can't avoid the topic.
Right.
Wow.
So you
also note, right, this one right here.
We're in a different moment. We're in a moment where,
well, we're the point that they're going to that Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest might seem to want to switch sides. Hypothetically, right? Gabbard and the rest, right? So what if all of a sudden Gabbard and both of them said, well, these people are not the right MAGA first, so I'm going to jump to the other side. It may seem unfathomable to you because that just seems it's the same reverse broken logic of Gabbard doing the same because it's principles, right? You could argue that you could just jump over here because you like it being on your side. It's dishonest. I mean, it's just simply not reality. So I just want to make that point for those that are on this current political side. And if to just think about it in that way, it's the same that Gabbard and anybody else, including Trump and Elon and all the rest that suddenly call themselves Republicans. They have no principles. None of them do. Just so we're clear on that, left or right.
A lot of things that I'll speak for myself that I had zero interest in ever talking about got kind of forced on us because of the wild, unbridled aggression of a few ideologues in Washington, kind of like you just can't avoid the topic.
Right.
So you are a Republican serving in the House. Really the only issue that all Republicans in the House agree on is that Israel is a priority over the United States. They all agree.
Oh, absolutely. They all agree on that.
But you're now saying that you don't think that's true.
No. As a matter of fact, I'm sticking to the campaign promises that I've made from the beginning.
Which is exactly what you should be screaming about, whether you think it's honest or not. My point is the inherent point is you still question, hold them feet to the fire, no matter what. Then it's okay, right? Even if you know they're dishonest, still point to the thing that's correct, right? And by her doing that, I mean, you have to look, that is what it looks like to maintain your promise. Like that's important, not just, well, the party says, now we're in a different path. What the team says, don't counter signal the leader, right? That's what you should be doing. Well, I promise this and I'm going to maintain that. And then what's even more crazy is when you start to get attacked by the fake America Firsters out there, it's very, like a Massey, for example, it becomes very, very evident that they're attacking you because you're not towing the line, not because you're somehow challenging you're obviously the one holding the reality of the America First promise.
Yes.
America first.
Yeah.
That's what I've said the entire time.
And you meant it, I guess.
I unapologetically mean it.
Yeah.
And apparently that's shocking.
Yeah, I can as real as always, guys. It just feels fake to me. Just even the conversation. Oh, so you're the real America First. Okay, let's start the new movement. Now we've lost control of this one. You know me, I'm a pessimist when it comes to government. I think we have every reason not to doubt them all the time. And in fact, I think it's in your interest. It behooves us to always doubt them. Isn't that what we just said? Right? So, it always gets framed as hatred or division. I think we should, by default, be like, I don't believe you. Prove it to me. That's how we. I don't even think that's like a product of where we are. That's always how it should have been. It's not like some uncomfortable thing. Just go well, prove it to me, because politicians lie, or you could be deceived. You could be simply incorrect. The idea that we can't think about how obvious that is part of the manipulation. But Glenn adds, note that Tucker barely mentioned Israel for years. Same as Mark. I hate Green. You having to say her three names, or MTG. Magic the Gathering. She was on thy show in 2023 and didn't feel strongly about it. So isn't that interesting, right? And so what's the shift? But they were forced by an endless series of post-October 7th censorship measures in the U.S., billions more for Israel, a new war. But here, guys, all of this was already happening. Other than the post-October 7th overlaps, we were already censoring for anti-Semitism. People are already passing bills we're still giving billions of dollars to Israel. So what's the real issue now? That it's being seen? So yeah, that's what I'm getting at is so whatever it is driving them, they're still standing, at least pointing in the right direction. So back it up, but question their real intentions because they've been there for a long time. It says, Ted Cruz says that like so many in Congress, he wakes up every day to be Israel's leading defender. He, in fact, said point blank that he joined to be Israel's leading defender in the United States Congress. They're not hiding it anymore. And I think they're vying for influence with our actual controllers, it seems. Everything is done in D.C. for Israel. But it's somehow those who notice and object to its centrality in our politics who get accused of being obsessed with Israel. Isn't that interesting? Right? The ones who call out the problem, like us. And the point is always, for those maybe new to the show, in no way are we talking about Jewish people other than the overlap of Zionism with Jewish people, or its overlap with Christianity, or its overlap with atheists, which exist in Israel to a larger degree than you might think. And it shows you the contradiction of all of it. But that's not to go into it in depth because every 30 seconds this comes up in the show. But the bottom line is, guys, Zionism is the real issue here. And that's what people are starting to fully call out. So this is the reason we're making this point to start here, because this overlaps with everything else we're talking about, even what's going on in El Salvador. And that's very important. I mean, was it this one? Yeah. Bukele's El Salvador dictatorship made in Israel. We're going to come back to it. I just did a great article from Mint Press News. It's very real. It's not some seeking to make connections to Israel. It is exactly what it looks like because that's the reality. Now, Lindsey Graham says something. I mean, I'll just play it for you. It's short. This is what, people like Tom Cotton and Cruz, and they all have this it feels like religious Zionism. That's what it is.
And this is my foreign policy when it comes to Israel. God blesses those who bless Israel. So that's why I go. I'm going to get that part right.
Isn't that just insane? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you, look, you can be religious, obviously, you can have your personal beliefs, but to act from a political, policy-based direction that God wants whatever Israel's doing is lunacy. I mean, look, even if you believe that, you can't prove that. So the idea that so tomorrow when they break the law, when they murder children, what's the line? Well, apparently if you believe God wants whatever they say they're doing, then that means there is no line, which clearly we're seeing with the genocide. With people like Graham, there is no line, guys. They'll support whatever Israel does, whether they're being paid for it or blackmailed or that they're just part of the agenda. It's obvious at this point. That's why these people are so, one, they're showing you to such a strong degree that they don't care what you think and that they, at the very least, don't think you have an influence on what they're doing. I think that shows you something in and of itself, because if they know that most people in this country don't agree and they're politicians who need your vote, explain that for me. Now, Glenn Greenwald points out, showing you the other side of the paradigm, and it's everyone, guys. It's safe for a few, like a Massey, for example, but there are concerns about, we talked about in the past. That's why I question all of them, clearly. But the vast majority to a T are blindly, they will tell you point blank, we will fight for Israel. And in many cases, Israel over U.S. interest, but don't say it like that. But if you look at the reasoning, if you look at where that's what it means. How long have I been telling you? If you look at the U.S., what's it called? The U.S. Congress, the website that's got listed all the legislation. And I haven't done this for years. I should make a note to do that right now or soon. This was a couple years ago. I made that point routinely, where if you look at the legislation and you do a random keyword search for the word Israel, at least when I was looking then, I bet you it's worse now, 50% of the legislation had Israel involved with it in some way, but things that had nothing to do with Israel, whether it was because there was some rider inserted to, it's some local wolves in Alaska bill that has to, then if they just insert, but, anti-BDS Israel, which was a real thing we talked about, or it's just Israel being involved with U.S. dynamics. It's everywhere and it's in your face. Nancy Pelosi defends Trump's bombing of Iran. Of course she does. To the New York Times, she says both parties are committed to U.S. support for Israel and the value of this friendship. And, who cares what Americans think, right? The vast majority, after any poll, will show you, any of them, that most Americans don't want war, period. In particular, when it comes to Iran and Israel, to the point to where it fractured his own support base. And yet they will stand there and go, yes, we support the thing that none of our people want, America first. at least from the side saying that. They all claimed America first. While she acknowledges it'll be better for Trump to come to Congress, she dismisses Dems' grievance that it's a big deal. Yeah, who cares about congressional authority, the Constitution? These people are frauds, guys, literal frauds. Glenn also points out, 2024, Thomas Massie describes how every member of Congress has their own AIPAC minder. Remember that?
Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, "I'll talk to my AIPAC person." And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
It doesn't benefit anybody. Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country?
I mean, do you really believe that? I mean, I point it out every time we play that, but come on. So that either very clearly suggests that he's not who he pretends to be. Think about pretending you've never heard that before. How long has this been a conversation? Plenty of us have been talking about it forever. And it's been there's been many different conversations in people specifically on the right, in his specific circle of conversation, who have been pointing to this forever. And you're going to pretend that he's never heard of an AIPAC? Come on. Maybe it's a show dynamic about how to get people to be more interested. Maybe it's not all this super dishonesty, but either way, you can go back and look at what he said about Iran. He thinks Iranians should be killed and a place shouldn't exist. That's what he said more than once, but now the reframing is that he's ashamed of what he did before and he wants to make it right. Hey, I certainly hope so. Why would we just take that? I'm going to wait to see what you do, like an honest person would. Prove it to me. With precedent, with your actions and your outcome. And over the next year, if you prove out to be, then, I think the obvious reality is already showing its face, but you guys can decide for yourself. But Thomas Massie in 2024, everyone's got an AIPAC guy, and becomes more vocal in questioning why it is that the U.S. finances Israel's military. 2025, ensuring everyone understands the punishment scheme. AIPAC is looking to oust Republican Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie in upcoming 2026 midterm election. AIPAC has been actively recruiting candidates to run in a primary against Massie. See, this is what I keep talking about, guys. We're not talking about even if there's not an ongoing election, midterms, whatever it is, AIPAC will lobby against you in ways that hurt your history. Lobbyists are supposed to be endorsing campaigns during election. The idea that they're in real time everywhere they go, actively trying to influence the policy is the point. That's not what lobbying is supposed to be, even if it is behind the scenes. AIPAC and the many other Israeli lobbying groups, AIPAC being directly part of the Israeli government, the lies they can spin around that are obscene. I've made this clear 100 times over. That's why, going back to JFK, they wanted to make it register as a foreign agent. And he died, and that suddenly went away. Same with the investigation of the Nimona nuclear research facility. The bottom line is that this is a group that is not an American company. This is an Israeli entity that's been rebranded as an American entity. And they are actively manipulating real-time outcomes and policy. Maybe I should just play that clip from the MSNBC clip. I mean, we might not have, I think we have time for it. But the point is, the immediate attack on somebody who simply doesn't lie, just exposes the truth. How does that, does it confuse anybody? I mean, this is Israel, a foreign government, acting to manipulate the outcome of his district because they don't like what he says. I mean, that should be in and of itself explanatory. It shows you that a foreign country is trying to dictate who's in control of this country. So maybe you should step back and go, maybe they've already done that, because they have. Very clear to me. Now, Simon, actually, let me see if I can grab that. I think we've got it in here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's right here.
American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It was incorporated in 1963. For 10 years prior to that, it was known as the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. AIPAC calls itself America's pro-Israel lobby, and according to its website, it has over 3 million members across the country in regional chapters working to, quote, expand and strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, end quote. You may know AIPAC as being one of the biggest and most recognizable donors to many of the members of Congress in your state. But contributing to campaigns is a relatively new function of the organization. Before 2021, AIPAC did not endorse candidates nor give political contributions. Its focus was on lobbying elected officials, not actually electing officials.
Yep.
But in a dramatic shift in policy, AIPAC began directly funding candidates and spending big on races in 2021. AIPAC Political Action Committee, AIPAC-PAC,
so to be clear, there's kind of overlaps there. The point being is that what he's discussing is trying to okay, if you're trying to get somebody elected, the point is that they're dumping money in which is not uncommon. But here, let me play it again, exactly the framing he had there.
But in a dramatic shift in policy, AIPAC began directly funding candidates and spending big on races in 2021. AIPAC Political Action Committee, AIPAC-PAC,
where was it?
Its organization. Before 2021, AIPAC did not endorse candidates nor give political contributions. Its focus was on lobbying elected officials.
Right. So the point is that he's saying, like, they didn't come out and say, I side with this guy. Right. But that's one part that he's highlighting there. But what I'm trying to say on top of that is that ultimately you've got situations year round where AIPAC is trying to influence in real time what the outcome is, as opposed to basically putting money in the hands of people they support, which is what lobbying we claim it is, we're told it is. And then, not just basically not demanding outcomes for the money in real time, which is what they do. Now, we all know lobbying generally works that way, but the reality is this is to a whole other level, to the point to where even corporate media was telling you that.
Not actually electing officials. But in a dramatic shift in policy, AIPAC began directly funding candidates and spending big on races in 2021. AIPAC Political Action Committee, AIPAC-PAC, filed something called a Statement of Organization with the FEC just in time for the 2022 election cycle, where it spent $50 million, including both direct contributions to candidates and outside spending, like TV advertisements. According to AIPAC, it donated money to 365 candidates from both parties, including every single member of both Democratic and Republican leadership in Congress.
It's pretty clear, right? That's so if you somehow have some ideological interest, why would you be funding all of them when they don't all agree? They have very different opinions. It's because what you're trying to do is influence all of them to be blindly pro-Israel, which is where we are.
109 Republicans who voted against the certification of the 2020 presidential election in America received campaign contributions from AIPAC. All in all, AIPAC gave money to 342 members of the 118th Congress. The 2022 elections were the most expensive midterms in American history, with a total cost of $8.9 billion spent. Now, last year, AIPAC ranked 15th in total expenditure by a political action committee, according to data collected by Open Secrets. But take a look at the other funders, money focused. Let's take a look at who benefits from AIPAC's largesse. Here are the top 20 recipients in Congress, the House Congress, advertisements and mailers on a number of representatives.
Standing for a simple proposition that there's no.
Yeah, I'll leave it there. I mean, we played it before. That was the one point I want to get across. There's some other ones they include in there. The simple point is to show you the massive shift into like real time, and as well as the guy they're playing at the end, he's a Jewish person, and they don't like that he doesn't blindly support them, and so they lobbied to get him removed, and they did. So it shows you how completely dishonest all of this comes down to. And left and right is the point. As Simon Godek points out, Hillary Clinton, 2017. Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Kash Patel, 2025. China interfered in the 2020 election. Meanwhile, AIPAC controls the majority of Congress and only openly brags about the fact that 95% of its candidates won their elections. That's not a joke. Daily Mail, right? Or the Mail Online. Yeah, the same Daily Mail. Kash Patel uncovers the same. Oh, that was the wrong. I thought the image was about the 95. I'm sure. Yeah, right here. Somebody posted it down here. They they publicly put this out on Twitter that, basically admitting that the vast majority, almost near 100% of people that they endorse or they give money to somehow end up winning their elections. Meanwhile, AIPAC controls the majority of Congress. Why is Thomas Massie seemingly the only politician willing to speak openly about Israel's interference in U.S. elections? And now they're trying to remove him from power. Now, here's a raw story. Trump's taking orders. Trump's ex-trusted operative, who apparently they hate each other now, says president has a boss. I find this very interesting. Someone who worked closely with Donald Trump and his associates is sounding the alarm about who the president's actually beholden to. Quote, as I've been telling you, it says, what we're watching isn't just an international crisis. It's a coordinated disinformation campaign, a national security threat, and a blatant assault on democracy, all unfolding in real time. He then noted that Pete Hegseth and Caroline Leavitt tried to change the narrative on the Iran strike, saying that Trump's military attack completely obliterated the country's nuclear program, which we'll come back to, but it's a lie, and they know it, he says. Instead of admitting what really happened, and the person's name is Pernas. We've mentioned before, he's Lev Pernas. They at one point were close, now apparently they don't like each other. But it goes on to say, he then noted that Pete Hegseth, but it's a lie, and they know it. And instead of admitting what really happened, they're now launching an FBI investigation, not into Trump's actions, not into the strikes that violated the international norms or the Constitution, which seems nobody wants to mention, but into the truth teller who exposed it, which is not new. Look at WikiLeaks, look at Assange, it's how it works. They're not the good guys in the conversation. On top of that, what we're talking about is them trying to hold accountable the person who proved they were lying about what they did and trying to use that to kind of muscle through it all to act like that's the real focal point. So what they do. It says the leaker who revealed that Iran's nuclear infrastructure is still intact and now being targeted. Now, I don't know if that's even the truth. I mean, we'll get to why I think that we'll go over both sides of the possible thing here. But it says, my sources now confirm that Trump's team plans to stonewall Congress. I think that's today in the Senate briefing. Let me know if you have any insight in the chat. Officials gave only selective cherry-picked info. Nothing new there. Even Lindsey Graham, one of Trump's staunchest defenders, came out afterward and said it plainly. By the way, exactly like we expected to happen, which is we still don't know where those uranium are. Okay, so when they warned them and allowed them to move it out of the way, I think that was the plan. So they could spin around and go, well, we don't even know where it is now. I think that was Israel's design, quite frankly, because I don't think in any way, shape, or form they want this to stop. They want to go up. They want to remove Iran from the table, just like they have been doing everywhere else. And he says, according to Pernas, this is all about how dictators stay in power by rewriting history. He's even lying about our allies and enemies. Meanwhile, Iran, this is what I find most telling, is canceling inspections. They're cutting off access to international nuclear monitors. That means they can now develop a nuclear weapon without oversight. And Trump is letting it happen. Are we serious? You see, this is how they use the paradigm to make it look like there's different. They're arguing the same thing. They're all doing the same thing. This is supposed to be an adversarial perspective. And what you're saying is that him lying about not destroying it, or rather lying about destroying it, is somehow their effort to allow them to do it. I mean, how would you even make sense of that with all the actions we've seen? Consider it. It's a possibility. But to me, this is about trying to use every effort, every, propaganda tactic to avoid the obvious, which we're still going over. But it says, going further, Pernas noted that Iranian oil will go to China and said Trump is taking orders from another foreign leader. He does not mean Israel. Quote, Trump claims he's tough on China, but he's just handed them discounted oil on a silver platter and let Iran resume nuclear development. The lie about the civilian nuclear program, which all the evidence, including from the U.S. government, despite Trump ignoring it all, that says that's not what they're doing in regard to nuclear weapons. So what happened, the reality of this is that the oil and the dynamic between Israel, Iran, and China was largely already happening. But the point is that because of his actions, that now that's going to be more likely. But I mean, what's the difference? The bombing of these facilities or obviously the severity of the attack, but the sanctioning, the control, the bombings, the assassinations of nuclear scientists. You don't think there was already a dynamic happening? Like, this is about trying to frame what was inevitably happening because of their belligerent military stance as him causing it possibly by secret design. Consider that, but facts matter, obviously. And it says, And as if that wasn't enough, Russian diplomats are now in D.C., not making deals, but delivering Putin's demands. See, we're going back to the binary nonsense from the two-party illusion that Putin's telling Trump what to do. You know why that's happening? Or one side says, we said this earlier, one side says China, one says Russia. While both are possible, they ignore the mountain of evidence that Israel's dictating it all. And that's why Massey's being attacked and plenty of other things are happening. Trump isn't running foreign policy. He's taking orders. See, my opinion, that is something that most Americans are actually starting to consider, and they're looking a different direction. So this is about trying to pull you back into the two-party binary argument, China, Russia, left, right, to make you miss the picture. Just my gut. You guys can decide for yourselves. I mean, you're not going to see statements like this pretty much ever unless it's about, we are starting to go, he's taking orders from somebody else, and they're trying to misdirect you at the last moment. I genuinely think that's what we're staring at here, but it's my opinion. Well, here is what Candace Owens had to say on Piers Morgan. And I absolutely detest the idea that Piers Morgan has in any way framed himself as some kind of a truth seeker in this conversation. Even now he pulls punches where it matters. But it's because they're not stupid. They see that everyone, including their staunch audience, we're already seeing through this. And so he's pulled it over. And he is one of these COVID-19 people, in my opinion. I'm not saying I could prove that, where they're trying. He kind of did that with COVID-19 as well. That's what he does. He's a fair weather journalist. And he sidles up next to the people. And so here's Candace, I think still, and you could question the same about her. I have my concerns too. Nonetheless, like I said, she's pointing out what I think is true. And I think it's worth pointing out and highlighting that as the true thing. Here's what she says on Morgan. And Furkan frames this as Candace literally cooking Piers Morgan with this will melt down Zionists and Israel so hard.
In the Middle East through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through Hamas. I mean, that's widely accepted and recognized. They've done
things widely accepted. Now, that's just kind of...
Really? You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist.
Just so it's clear, what he's trying to push right there is the same old lazy argument that you have no evidence for other than intelligence from the Israeli and U.S. Joint efforts to claim that Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis are somehow proxies of Iran. No, they're allies, like a lot of other overlaps. And the most insulting is to claim that Hamas is somehow not funded by Israel, that you can prove easier than anything. Dave Smith has said it to his face more than once on this show, but he still pretends because he's a liar, guys. That's my point. He pulls the punches where he needs to try to make himself look like he's fighting for the truth. That's my opinion. Decide for yourself. But that being said, he starts, at least the clip starts where he cuts off about how that's widely accepted. Well, what else is widely accepted? The 9/11 lie, the USS Liberty lie. I mean, a lot of things that are widely accepted are pretty obviously not the truth. He knows that. He's not stupid, but he is a liar.
State. Okay.
Through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through Hamas. I mean, that's widely accepted and recognized. They've done
things widely accepted. Now, that's just kind of...
Really? You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist state. Okay. Israel right now is imparting a genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people.
We should not shy away from saying it. This is exactly what you can prove. The facts, the international community, the human rights groups, everything. Just like Israel, Al-Qaeda and ISIS being proxy elements of these intelligence agencies. Let's stop pulling punches and be honest about this. Push them into the right conversation.
So I'm really over this idea.
With facts, to be clear. Not opinion, not assumption, not hyperbolic narratives, conspiracy theory, facts that we can literally prove.
A genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people. So I'm really over this idea like somehow Israel has the moral high ground and we have to get behind them.
I didn't say that.
Because we got to go after the bad guys.
I wasn't saying that.
We have.
Oh, hang on. Look, we can come to Gaza where I think we'll reach agreement about what Israel's government's been doing there in the last few months. Without
but it's
any
relevant.
question.
If you're going to call Iranians terrorists, if they right now had an open concentration camp where they were mass killing their own people, we would all be saying this is ridiculous. So it's rich to me that people are concerned about Iran having nukes. What I'm concerned about Israel, who won't even admit that they have nukes, having nukes, while at the same time, they are executing a genocide and a Holocaust in Gaza that the world is watching. So who's the bigger terrorist is the question today. I would say as an American that if we're going to get behind a regime change, it should be in Israel first. So that would be my position. I think the position of a lot of people who are waking up to the fact that Zionism has brought us nothing but grief in America. Can you name one positive thing that Zionists have contributed to America? That us fighting these perpetual wars on behalf of Zionism has contributed to?
Now, first and foremost, the last thing we should be screaming for is regime change in any other place. So that's where I get the most suspicion. And maybe it's just about making a point, which I would even understand. But the idea that we're like, it's the whole left-right point where, the left did it, now the right wants to do it back to them. That's how this always seems to go. It's a trap of it's an ideological trap to argue that somehow we should then mobilize our government to overthrow the Israeli government. Like, even though it's obviously the worst thing I could possibly point out in the world right now, the way that government's conducting everything, and it's nothing other than an indictment of the government and its actions. The last thing we should want is this government, who's equally a part in what they're doing, to claim they can violently, militarily overthrow this government and put something better in place. Has that worked anywhere else? So I'm not saying I think she probably is just doing it to make a point. Either way, it's a dangerous suggestion that's being picked up online. People claiming, like, kind of trying to roll this into, no, that's the regime change. How about we don't want regime change anywhere? Let the people decide that. Let the different, because let's understand, there is momentum in Israel of people who do want something different. Yes, it's clearly not the majority. Regardless, just like it wouldn't be our place in Iran or anywhere else, it's not our place to decide for them, no matter how bad it looks from over here. That's the reality of how this is supposed to work. Some people just can't wrap their minds around that we have to be the arbiters of everything, except when it comes to your lives, you have a completely different view. Or, nah, you're not allowed to tell me how I have to live my life. Well, it's weird how Americans love to do that in certain circles to everybody else. You know why? Supremacy, guys. It's a problem with a lot of things, a lot of religions, a lot of ideologies, a lot of different things. But I just think that's important. Oh, tell me we didn't just, please don't do this right now. Wow. Okay, well, do me a favor, Orwell, if you guys are there, text me and let me know that you can still see what's going on. I think I have to restart the show. The whole StreamYard thing just freaked out on me. Nope, it's Brave. Oh, God darn it. Okay. Guys, bear with me. I don't know if you can even still see me right now. This is the stuff we have to, this is just insane. It's just so ridiculous. And just so you know, for those, this will never stop me. Yeah, so you guys can still see me. My whole screen is all garbled up and I can't see what's going on. The whole screen is glitching out, and so I'm going to have to, looks like, restart the Brave. I think it's Brave, to be quite honest. I have more issues with Brave than anything else. It's frustrating. But I don't think it's Brave, the platform. I think it's something through that. Man. Here, let me do this if I can even get a shot of this. All right. Well, guys, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave the browser and try to restart this somewhere else and reset up. It might not take that long. I'm hoping that resolves the problem. So please stay there. Bear with me. So, let me see if I can play something somehow. Nah, I can't even scroll down. We're going to be discussing the idea of the false binary.
What an illusion of choice does, it establishes the baseline assumptions that nobody questions.
This is part of the fifth generation warfare that we've talked about. Voting for the lesser of two evils. It's definitely an emotional, psychological trap that people are in.
You're cheerleading for an insane ideology because you think you're winning.
The role we have as media, how do we help everybody understand this is theater and you need to get back into the real world?
If you're opposed to the agenda, you should oppose it regardless of who's selling it to you.
Okay. Man, that is wild. Okay, bear with me. It does appear to be the entire browser. So I'm just going to pull that aside and hope that doesn't affect anything else. Now, you know what's interesting? It was actually also the chat that was from the Safari browser. So this is something else entirely. Whatever. I'm going to stop wasting more time. Let me pull this back up real quick. I had to jump over to an entirely new browser. Surprised it even stayed going. So we're over on the Vivaldi browser at this point, which I'm not even advocating for. It's just a different one. Don't know enough about it. Here, screen share. Oh, you got to be kidding me. Let me see if I can do that through a different platform. Okay, I think I can. Okay. Wow. So this is what I was looking at. I grabbed a little screenshot so you guys can see it. So, and this is just one of the screens here. Check this out. See how it's all garbled? Look at that. Everything's all weird. And no matter what I touched, it wouldn't actually click. Isn't that crazy? So give me a second. Let me do this. Let me go back to let me play the next clip I was going to play. And as that's happening, I'm going to reset up and hopefully get everything organized here. Okay. So this one, that's actually a perfect time to play this. It's a longer clip that I think is very important. What I was going to go over next, if I can, see, that's the problem. Damn it. Look, the screen share, I'm just going to show you so you guys know what I'm dealing with here, and then I'll see if I can, I'm going to have to reset this all up. Look at what you can see now on the screen. That's the browser. It's all the tabs are gone. All right, so give me a bear with me. I'm going to play this clip that you can almost see right there, and it's about Zionism. Very well may have to reconvene another date. Stay with me though. I'm not giving up just yet. We'll play this clip, and I'll be right back.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
No. I was with him until he said the eternal capital of the Jewish people. President Trump has the right to make whatever foreign policy he wants, and if he feels that Miami Beach is best to recognize as the capital of Israel, that's his business, he can do it. But once he starts talking about the Jewish people, now he's encroaching upon religion, and now that's my domain. There is absolutely no political relationship between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. It's merely a holy city. The Jewish people don't have a capital. We never had a capital. Countries have capitals. States have capitals. That's the definition of a capital. Capital, dictionary, noun, the most important city or town of a country or region. Now, the Jewish people are not a country or region. The Jewish people are a religious community. We pray towards Jerusalem, but we relate to Jerusalem only as a holy city, not as a political capital city. And all of those overtures that we make to Jerusalem and the yearning that Jews have for Jerusalem is only as a holy city, not as a capital city. And because it's a holy city, it doesn't matter who has sovereignty over it. Jerusalem is just as holy and just as much Jerusalem, whether it's under the auspices of the Turks or the Romans or the British or whoever. It's important to know that the Zionists were the ones that started this business of the capital of the Jewish people, and it's an idea that conflicts directly with the teachings of Judaism. At Mount Sinai in the desert, the Torah says, the Bible says about us, Hayom hazeh niyesa la'am. That's when we became a people. The Jewish people aren't a people because of a land. We're not a people because of a language. We're not a people because of a culture. We're a religion, and when we were deputized into the religion, when we accepted the religion given to us by God, that's when we became the Jewish people. We had no land, no territories, we had no capital city, and in fact, our commentators say the reason why God gave the Jews the Torah in a desert before they went into the Holy Land was in order to teach them that land, country, has nothing to do with your Jewishness. Your Jewishness is because you accept the religion. A couple of years ago, the Pope went to visit Netanyahu.
Okay, so really quickly, guys, I've solved it, so the show will continue, so please don't jump away. I'm going to let this finish. I plan to play this either way. This is the last part of the segment about, and this is shared by Zachary Foster, PhD in Palestinian history from Princeton. Interviewed him more than once about this topic, and this is something he says that everybody should see. Like the reality, and he's been really fighting for this for a long time to break. Same with someone like Dan Cohen. He's been trying to really highlight a Jewish person himself, the lie of Zionism around the Jewish religion. So this is a Jewish Orthodox a rabbi telling you that they're lying to you. But you know this, but this is just more ammunition. It's a great clip that will be included in the show notes. Let me finish this. I'll make sure we got everything else lined up, and we'll keep going.
And Netanyahu's bragging to the Pope, this is where Jesus lived in this land, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrected him. The Pope said, no, Aramaic. And Pope was right. And Netanyahu says, yeah, but he understood Hebrew. Well, maybe he did, but Hebrew was never the national language of the Jewish people. It was a holy language, just like the land of Israel was a holy land. Oh, by the way, if you see the clip and you don't know which of the two people talking is Netanyahu and which is the Pope, the Pope's the one wearing the yarmulke. Even if we were to pretend that the Jewish people...
Isn't that funny?
...have a capital, that would have nothing to do with whether Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel, because Israel's not the Jewish people. Israel has nothing to do with the old Jewish Commonwealth. It's a country that was created in 1948. When you hear the Israelis or the Zionists talk about how Jerusalem has a connection with the Jewish people for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, it's all true, but that doesn't translate to, well, therefore Jerusalem has to be part of Israel. People think that Israel is some kind of continuation of the Jewish government, but it's not. It's a completely different form of government, completely different values, completely different ideology, and completely different people. These are not religious Jews that are running the country. These are atheists. And yet, the Israeli prime ministers from Ben-Gurion all the way up to Netanyahu use the Bible as an excuse for ownership of the land. Ben-Gurion, he says the mandate is not...
How long have we been telling you this? And it's easily verifiable, guys. Like Herzl himself, the founder of Zionism, was an atheist. It's not hard to prove. All these people are constantly trying to grift and lie and convince you that you're somehow a bad person for acknowledging the facts. Simple.
Not our Bible, but the Bible is our mandate. This is a man that didn't believe the Bible was given by God. He didn't believe God ever spoke to prophets. He didn't believe it at all. Neither does Benjamin Netanyahu. It says in the Bible, watch the Sabbath to keep it holy. Netanyahu doesn't refrain from work on the Sabbath. It says not to eat non-kosher food in the Bible. Does Netanyahu do that? No. There is nothing holy in the Bible that Netanyahu cares about. The only thing he cares about is his land. Restorationist Protestants, we call them evangelical Christians today, they existed hundreds of years before any Jewish Zionist was ever born. And because the evangelicals, the restorationists, had great influence in Britain, and Britain had the mandate, the Zionists very, very much adopted the Christian evangelical interpretation of the Bible, and that's what they use today. You'll find that Benjamin Netanyahu sometimes even espouses Christian evangelical interpretations of the Bible over the Jewish ones. A number of years ago.
And this is where you come to the point of where, you know, the original Zionism was Christian Zionism.
Netanyahu spoke at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he mentioned a prophecy in the book of Yecheskel about how the prophets saw dried bones rising from the ground and growing flesh and becoming live again. And Netanyahu said that that prophecy is fulfilled with the state of Israel, because the Jews were dried bones and now they grew flesh and they're real people again. This interpretation is not found anywhere in any Jewish source, because in Judaism, this is impossible. But for over a century, this has been a Christian evangelical interpretation.
And as I understand it, it's because the reality from the Orthodox Jewish perspective is that the end times are brought on by the return of of God, and that would be when this is essentially the land being given by God, not necessarily by British mandate, right? The Balfour Declaration, you know. But I'm not an expert in the topic of the religious, you know, what's the right word for it? The academic side of it. Nonetheless, the point is that what he's highlighting here is that the people who are using this today don't believe this, or at the very least, that whenever started, it was like an occupation, if you will, of the religion for the use of their colonial project. That's I mean, it's of all the things we discuss in this vein, it is the most easy to prove. There's documents that go back for decades from the UN, from human rights groups, even from Jewish communities that called this stuff out a long time ago.
Zionists, when they talk about the Bible, they're not talking about the Judaic version of Judaism and Jewishness. They're talking really about the Christian evangelical version. Netanyahu has no right to claim that his state is mine. I was born in America. My father was born in Poland. My mother's family's from England. We have nothing to do with Israel. We're Jews. We're observant Jews. We're religious Jews. I wear a yarmulke. Netanyahu doesn't. I keep the Shabbos. Netanyahu doesn't. And Israel is not my nation state in the slightest. This is a unilateral claim of the Israelis, of the Zionists, and it's an assault on my religion. So too, the claim that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people because it transforms the Jewish people from a religious identity to a national identity, to a political identity. And it's an assault on my religion when Netanyahu says that because Jerusalem is so connected to the Jewish people, therefore it must be part of the state of Israel. Jerusalem's holiness, Jerusalem's value to the Jewish people has nothing to do with who owns it, and it certainly has no reason to be part of the state of Israel.
Right. That's what a real man of God sounds like from whatever religion we're discussing. Somebody who understands, you know, the materialistic nature of what they're doing. Like they're so obvious. It's like a Rabbi Shmuley, for crying out loud. I don't care what your perspective is. That's not somebody who acts the way he is, says the things he does, the hatred he spews is not a man of God. Depending, unless we're talking about a different God here, or in the context, or just let's just say a benevolent person, or in the context of what was the other example? Just anybody who is claiming to be whether Christian or Jewish or Muslim who supports the genocide going on in Israel. I don't care if you believe they've got the right, you know, the legal background, like they're doing it because it's legal, because they're defending themselves. A person who believes in, you know, thou shalt not kill, for example, and says, but yes, Israel has the right. I mean, come on. It's everywhere you look. These people are deceiving you. All right. Okay. So this is Zachary Foster's tweet. It says, how Zionism is a perversion of Judaism by the brilliant, this is Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. 7 minutes, 7 best minutes of your life, he says. And I'll include our interview with Zachary Foster, the documented and suppressed history of Palestine and Zionism. And I believe we had one more after that as well. Now, let's talk about some health-related factors that I think are very important that overlap with AI, which I think overlap with the larger conversations. Nonetheless, just wanted to make sure we discuss this a bit. This is something that came out on the 26th. Single-shot malaria vaccine delivery system could transform global immunization. Now, this is just about the larger direction of all this, which I'm very concerned about. But it says a team of scientists at the University of Oxford have developed an innovative vaccine delivery system that could allow a full course of immunization, both initial and booster doses, to be delivered in just one injection. Now, we already saw where this was going before. They floated the same ideas before. The idea that ultimately we're talking about something that it can release at a later time release, or really a release whenever they decide to trigger that release from outside your body by using nanotechnology. In preclinical trials, the technology provided strong protection against malaria, matching efficacy of traditional multi-dose vaccines. Well, it doesn't really ring as a positive endorsement based on what we know about things we're pointing to. But the simple point in this, there was some highlighted that I lost, unfortunately, based on what just happened. But I'll just jump past it. The point is simply we're talking about a nanotech overlap. The direction of these being released, where was it right here? Oxford team developed tiny biodegradable capsules. So in this case, there is a difference between nanoparticles and nanotechnology. My worry is that these things are very easily intertwined, and we already saw that with the COVID shot, that I think we're finding out a lot of things that were there that we weren't told about. But it says, can be co-injected with the first vaccine dose and programmed to release the booster dose weeks and months later. A mouse in the trial, in a mouse model, the single shot strategy using the R21 malaria vaccine they're using protected against the disease nearly as effective as the two. So saying it's not as effective, which is just an interesting point. But the point is just the direction of all of this. And why in the world we are still pretending like any of us, like I think the majority of people are pretty uncertain about where this technology is going. And this is the actual study, core shell microcapsules compatible with routine injectable prime boost immunization against malaria with single shot. Now, all of this, by the way, is being overlapped with the current U.S. government direction, which I think is important to point out. Breaking the malaria barrier, this is from 2024. The WHO approved R21 matrix vaccine and its global impact. Just showing you the interconnectivity of the WHO, the WEF, the current administration, and the former administration, or rather just your U.S. government or the U.S. government. Now, this is an article that came out on the 15th, 2018, October 15, 2018. The Internet of Bodies is setting dangerous precedents. Just included it for the idea. You can read more about it. We've all been talking about where this goes. We're now well beyond that as far as I'm concerned. And I think just the evidence shows we're at the Internet of Things, Internet of Nano Things, Internet of Nano Bio Things, well beyond the body. And really the body would be after the things part, but the secondary idea of the nano things and, nano bio things, like it gets to the point of the nano size things, but then the overlap with the nano and bio, where as Charles Lieber would tell you, once you get to that size, it becomes irrelevant. That they act like biological things do, which is just terrifying. But as Orwell shared, you might have seen this clip about wearables A little reminder about these wearables, which they say is under the guise of health. Article below, your Alexa and Fitbit can testify against you in court. It's one small part of where this goes. And it's not, I mean, small only because of the real picture of what it is. It's a very important part, but it's only one small part of what this is all leading toward. In case you didn't see it, I know it's been discussed around. Oh, actually, see, I did miss something. That's so frustrating. Wait, let me see if this comes back. Hold on. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I moved it down. No, okay, I'm coming back to it. So let's play this first. This is about the wearables point in RFK Jr., which is one obvious example of something that I think the MAGA crowd was really not about. Once again, showing you that this was people were played in a lot of fields around this last selection process.
Secretary Kennedy, my first question is that there is a tremendous amount of research that shows that greater engagement with one's health leads to better outcomes. In recent years, American innovators have created and improved wearable devices so that not only are consumers able to better engage with their health through monitoring data, but they are able to share that data with providers. I believe American consumers, in line with the 21st Century Cures Act, should be able to access these innovative wellness tools.
The Cures Act we discussed for a long time, right? I mean, the overlap with Trump, the point as always for me is that it's just your government involved with these left and right all the way through. And these are manipulations when you look at how these things have been used already. And now it's interestingly kind of overlapping with the direction, which it always really was, of the Great Reset, the Build Back Better, the technocratic direction, the WF. Just because it was under a different, with a D next to the name and a slightly different framing, don't allow yourself to ignore how obviously these are all the same directions.
Secretary Kennedy, do you agree that consumers should continue to have access to these tools?
Absolutely. In fact, we're about to...
To be clear, access to them is not what we're discussing. That's where you're going to get the argument. Well, we should all, he only said, well, it's not about that. It's about what happens next. We all should have access. If you want access, whatever, you can go out and buy what you want. That's the idea. But it's about the fact that he wants everyone to have them. And that's not about allowing it. That's about driving it, which we all know.
Launch one of the biggest advertising campaigns in HHS history to encourage Americans to use wearables.
Isn't that in and of itself an odd thing? Like, why would you need to propagandize, to advertise as the Health and Human Services? Couldn't you just put out a notification that says, if you're interested, we think this is in your interest? That would be normal. Right? But propagandizing you is either one of two things, suggesting that you're too dumb to do your own research or to look for yourself. So we have to scream it out all the time so you actually see it and do something about it, or that we know you don't agree with it and we're going to propagandize you into thinking that. There's only one of two ways you can look at it, in my opinion. Because the idea is to act like they need to constantly, by the way, use your tax dollars to reverberate things back at you through the media. I mean, if the idea is that you need that kind of obsessive propaganda in your face to maybe make the right choice, that's paternalism. They don't think you're smart enough to make your own choices. I think it's more the latter. I think it's about the fact they know we don't want this, and the idea is trying to frame it as in your interest, as always, and it's the same tune the left was singing.
It's a way of people can take control over their own health. They can take responsibility. They can see, as you know, what food is doing to their glucose levels, their heart rates, and a number of other metrics.
Which I won't disagree, have benefit. But so too does Neuralink and other things we talked about. The point is where this actually goes, whether it's surveillance, whether it is real-time monitoring of your biometrics, which is a huge thing right now. All of that stuff has been discussed, and all of it is showing you that they are not keeping these things private. I mean, every single time we cross these conversations, it's the same point. They all swear up and down that they won't do X, Y, and Z, and they almost always do. Whether it's an accident, a hack, or a deliberate lie.
As they eat it. And they can begin to make good judgments about their diet, about their physical activity, about the way that they live their lives.
Okay, so the implication there is that you need this device and their guidance to be able to make the right choices. I disagree.
We think that wearables are a key to the MAGA agenda, making America healthy again. And we are going to, my vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
That's the point. That's quite a different statement than having it available for everybody. Obviously, I think that's a concern for people that we're calling these things out during the agenda. Now, look, you can argue that as its individual point, maybe there's not nefarious, but you see how this fits into a carefully laid out plan that your government, left and right, has been discussing for a long time. And let's not pretend like we don't know that Trump's current administration has already overlapped with the World Economic Forum and Davos and plenty of other examples. And, but yet because he spoke the avils of the woke pronouns, suddenly we ignore the fact that he literally was on the side of everything else. It's lazy to see how, the point is always, right now it seems embarrassing how easy it is to play certain partisans. But as she points out, they can testify against you in court, which that seems to never go away. The Alexa and it obviously why you would want to put a device like that in the center of your house, it blows my mind. But MIT wearable device tracks individual cells in your bloodstream in real time. 2025, April. So maybe that seems like something you might need for your health benefits, but it goes so far beyond like even what we think matters right now. That's what I'm trying to say about we don't even really understand what these things, the biometric data they're scooping up is really going to mean in the next couple of years, 10 years. Think about there's something different that like it's less, we're stuck back at the old like analog cameras and spy. We're so far beyond these things and we don't even understand that yet. I barely even grasp what is really going on because it's all, reading through the lines. Everything's hidden from you. The truth is we're going to find out soon enough. Molcom workshop here, something Orwell shared with me. It's just a symposium or a little presentation. It says Professor Nunzio Tucutio from the University of Catania is giving a keynote titled, quote, nanoparticles as suitable messengers for reliable molecular communication among implantable active medical devices. Great. So communicating from inside your body, which is exactly what we're all talking about. That's where this is going. Then overlapping this with the technology, the injection, starting with the malaria platform and kind of overlapping all of this with the same thing. Shannon Joy points out, this is Bob Malone is getting us ready for replacement vaccines. Yeah, that's, he's in the new position now. Malone is pushing the flu block, a vaccine using cells from the fall army worm, a moth species. Bottom line is the quadvalent shot. I'll show you in a second. Here is Censorceptor saying, you really got to read the flu block webpage. I'll include for you. It's, guys, yet another example, right? Maybe the last one you could say, well, it was already in the works and he didn't have time to look. Okay, here we are now well past the time where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said, gold standard. We will use that standard. We placebos and guess what? Everyone since he said that has not been that. You got to start calling it out sometime. And as they point out, and I'll include the link for you, 0 gold standard science. All the old tricks employed in this new shot. Undercounting of vaccinated flu cases, overcounting of unvaccinated cases, no true placebo, no real endpoints, use of PCR. No joke, guys. That's what Bob Malone is supporting. That's what RFK Jr. is. I haven't heard him push back. And the reality is, guys, he was the one that put there. It's all the same conversation. There's 1,000 endpoints. Question it, sure. Wonder whether he might not have known about it. Whether it was a DOJ or what is it in this case, a vaccine panel Democrat holdover or whatever you want to argue. Fine, consider it all. Just keep recognizing that every single one of these steps is going in the wrong direction. That's all we need to do right now. And as they point out, as Censorceptor pointed out, I think, quite literally a sheep in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, excuse me. That's what the act for the podcast, the Flu Block website, their little logo image is a wolf with sheep's clothing. I mean, it's insane. It's almost like, you decide for yourself if you think that's relevant. I think it's hilariously insulting actually, but Flu Block, quadvalent. That's what it is. So even at the simplest terms, that means it's 4 different shots. 4 different antigens, 4 different potential antibody. I mean, we've played that clip 100 times over. Fauci or others will tell you that if you vaccinate for the wrong thing, it could have disastrous results. But yet, let's try 4 at the same time and see if that works out. But even this, you can read about it, and they'll tell you the same things: possible Guillain-Barré syndrome, neurological problems. Like the idea that we ever pretend like that's just part of this. That the daily routine things that we claim are safe and effective could also just destroy your life forever. How can you then find that? How about no, entirely across the board? I don't care if it's a 1% chance. I'm not going to take the idea is they want to pretend that this is somehow in your best interest, that if you don't, the risk is worth. Hardly. I mean, to make your own decisions, I'm not a medical expert, but my God, At what point do we just start being honest about what a grift all this is? And that's not even to get into whether they have some benefit if you choose. Donald Trump rolls out the AI biomedical control grid. That was Stargate program, which was, of course, backed by Israel and the deep state. That was January 23rd, 2025. The point is that this is all the interconnected point, the AI biomedical direction. That's whether it's AI-produced drugs, which they're already doing, more than one, or the overlap of the surveillance part of how that could play out. So on that note, let's also talk about that. Here's the World Economic Forum, AI and health, buckle up for change, but read this before takeoff. That was 2024, January. So right now, with Trump's administration going in the same, I should have to make the same point every time. They're all on the same side, ladies and gentlemen. They're all backing the same thing. The Great Reset, or the, whatever you want to call it, the woke left, or the bro flakes, the snowflakes, whatever it is. It's the same direction with a slightly different slant to it. Now, overlapping it with where it goes in the surveillance, realizing how easy it is, if not already, to overlap this with the same things we're highlighting. With AI, with surveillance, but also internally, which is part of this conversation. But let's go to the outside discussion. Trump plans executive orders to power AI growth in race with China. Typical. I know a lot of people just think this excuse means all. And we can't let China do it do what first? Like, what do you even really think this amounts to? Like, all of them, like, are we trying to talk about some kind of a sentient AI and that we have to get there first? This is the new space race dynamic? Or is it really just about having the better, large language models? And if that's the case, then everyone's already getting to that point. This idea that we frame it as if we have to beat China. I mean, I'd love for someone to articulate what they think that endpoint looks like. And if we don't get there first, that they somehow have what? Like, I'm not denying the obvious power of this, but I just don't think Americans are truly reflecting, especially in the partisanship, of what this argument means and whether or not that's even truly the way this is going, or even more so, whether or not they're working together over the top of all of it for some ultimate control. But they are now rolling out this argument yet again to say we're going to rush to the end point, whatever that is, because China first. We got to beat them first, which is always how this goes. It says the Trump administration is writing a package of executive orders. Because who cares about going through the congressional process, right? Because Democrats, that enough. That explains it all, right? That's how simple this is. Constitution is the most important and shall not be infringed unless Trump just doesn't like what the Democrats have to say, or the Democrats don't like what Trump has to say. The whole point is that the executive order is a circumvention of what we argue this country is. And he called it out when Obama did it, and he does the same. Just like Bush, they're all the same thing. You are simply using that argument, like the China AI point, to circumvent what we expect. And that is to actually go through the congressional dynamic, to argue this is what we want, have Congress vote on it. Like the country used to pretend to operate. But it says top economic rivals, U.S. and China, are locked in a technological arms race, and with it, secure an economic and military edge. Like the idea always comes back to military, like that the first person somehow is going to be able to militarily take over the other one, which is what the U.S. government vies for in every possible circumstance. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's exactly what China's doing. But excuse me for a moment for not being able to see anything else in the world other than the U.S. government constantly pushing its military supremacy or control over everybody else in the world. So hard to know what the other side would look like, but that's where we can currently see. The huge amount of data processing behind AI requires a rapid increase in power supplies that are straining utilities and grids in many states. Right. So to the expense, or at the expense of you, America. Maybe when they achieve whatever they claim they're going for, there'll be some kind of rapid benefit to everybody. But until then, they're straining the very system they claim is, basically everything they do is at your expense. I mean, right now, that's very clear. Everything they're doing with foreign policy, what they're doing here, straining utilities and grids that are causing problems around the country, but it's all because we got to beat China. That's where this goes. Well, let's also not forget at the same exact time, we already saw this, but this is a new discussion from the 22nd, Senate parliamentarian green lights state AI law freeze in GOP mega bill. It's exactly what it sounds like. The Senate's rules referee late Saturday. So this is what I was worried about, because I thought the Senate might push back. It hasn't happened just yet, but they have now allowed Republicans to include in their mega bill a 10-year moratorium on enforcing state and local artificial intelligence laws. No oversight of AI in the most alarming time in history of AI. Even though half of them tell you this could destroy the world, but they're going to argue we don't want any oversight. Lutnick will stand there in front of everybody and say we're not going to have any oversight, whether or not this happens. It's insane. It is insane. And it is about allowing the rapid rush with no concern, no oversight, no worry of what it will possibly do because China, or whatever the real argument is. Control, I would argue. But my God. I mean, it's the same as in the midst of the nuclear race, acting like we have to, everyone everywhere start working on nuclear bombs as fast as you can. Let's see how fast that it's irresponsible and it's dangerous. We all seem to know that. Now pay attention as they rapidly rush this forward and pretend like they're battling against the other side. This is, if the Senate allows this and it actually passes with no real pushback, I think that says more to, it points more to the two-party illusion than anything else. Let's not forget how Palantir plays a role in this, as Trump has tapped them to compile data on Americans, which, as we all reported, those of us that have been watching, this is not new. This is just the corporate media covering what we've been trying to expose for a really long time, because I think it's obvious people are starting to see it. And this is about controlling the flow of that conversation, or trying to. But yes, that's what's going on. Patriot Act 2.0 and whatever you want to frame it as, it's not new. This is just the admission of what they've compiled through Doge and the control of all the non-siloed information that they've now jammed into one central place that I think Israel and the rest are having access to without any... I mean, there's 1,000 points to go into. Lack of ethics pledges, the control of the Zionism over this country and the current administration. Even Palantir themselves. Read the article. It's not New York Times that you have to trust in all this. The data has been around for a long time. Here is James Corbett's excellent report that you should definitely check out. It's simply called, What Does Palantir Actually Do? Palantir versus the World. And it's an excellent, read it. It's very important. And this is what James Lee, I started with, played about Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of Palantir. Let's not forget who also has a strategic partnership with the Israeli government in the midst of their ongoing genocide, so they can use their AI to kill people in real time and learn from it. Here's what Peter Thiel just had to say.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation. It's a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
This is the guy that's basically running America from the back room, and he can't answer whether or not humans should exist. Okay, he's got his tentacles everywhere, all over Trump's office. From people like David Sachs in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, to companies like Palantir, if you remember, they're creating a master database on all of us, down to Doge, and all the way up to the Vice President, J.D. Vance. He's all over Trump's cabinet as well, from the Department of Defense to the Department of State, Department of Energy, also the Department of Health and Human Services. Let me just read some quotes from this insane interview called Peter Thiel and the Antichrist. Here he's talking about trans, and he says, quote, "The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's, man, it's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body."
See, so they're always trying to play at the left-right paradigm. You know, we don't want the woke and parent, except when you really dive into it, they're just in a more extreme version of the same direction. They're the transhumanist direction. That's what we've always worried, seen as some kind of overlapping segue. At the very least, it's all a means to an end for all of them. That's my point about the woke dynamic. It's all a means to an end. These people are trying to control your life, and they don't care how they get there.
What the f? He also told the story of when he was at He's talking about trans, and he's well from the Department of Defense to the Department of State, Department of Energy, also the Department of Health and Human Services. Let me just read some quotes from this insane interview called Peter Thiel and the Antichrist. Here he's talking about trans, and he says, quote, "The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's, man, it's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body." What the f? He also told the story of when he was at PayPal and he took his entire company to a, quote, freezing party, and that you could freeze your whole body or just your head. And this part where he's asked whether fusing humans with computers is heretical from a Christianity perspective, and he says, yeah, I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so there is a sense in which the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration, it is all about transcending nature. Maybe I'm just the simpleton here, and I'm the one who doesn't get it, but I don't think we should all become computers.
It is just wild how clear it is if you're just paying attention. All these screaming grifters out there that want you to not focus on anything they're currently doing. And as Jones will play down Palantir as some left-wing thing, only trying to expose the government. That's why the left doesn't like it. I mean, it's insulting to your intelligence, and it should be. They think you're that stupid. As Derek had covered, meet the Peter Thiel acolytes in Donald Trump's second administration, and goes over quite a few of them. And then at the end point, highlights an ideological pull that comes from all of them, the Thiels, the Vances, the Andreessens, the Karps. Meet the man whose philosophy has influenced Peter Thiel and the technocrats. That's Curtis Yarvin. It's worth understanding. As Andreessen just pushed the idea of the good oligarch saving you from the bad, it comes back to this same kind of idea. They're all pushing similar things. But as James Lee points out, the idea that you can't even articulate whether humans should continue to exist. Guys, this person is integral to the current administration, to the system being used to surveil everyone in this country. And it completely overlapped with the Israeli government, which I don't think is a small point. And of course, Derek's great article, Welcome to the Palantir World Order, April 24th. Now, Destiny Resendez points something interesting out. Here's the White House. This is yesterday. Literally, it's ridiculous music where it's Trump and it says, making the most wearable shirt design ever, part 1. And they literally write from the White House Twitter page, Daddy's home. This says right there. That's a shirt, Daddy's home. I mean, isn't that a joke that people isn't that supposed to be insulting to the MAGA? Isn't that what people say to make fun of them? I mean, that's what they wrote. And Destiny literally says, you're joking, right? Daddy's home? Like the weapon system, Palantir. And the point is, it's a reference here to Joe Lonsdale. The phrase was used by Joe Lonsdale, a Palantir co-founder, to celebrate Donald Trump's re-election, who supports Trump, tweeted Daddy's home to express his approval of Trump's return to the presidency. Following Trump's re-election, Palantir experienced a significant stock surge, which led to Lonsdale and Cohen, both founders of Palantir, becoming billionaires. The phrase Daddy's home is also linked to the company's success post-Trump's re-election, highlighting the positive impact on Palantir's stock and the creation of 2 billionaires from the company's ranks. So, the idea is suggesting that somehow Trump is your daddy, your paternal figure. That's paternalism, right? That's the opposite of what you pretended. I mean, it's just so frustrating to watch people out there trying to pretend like this is something different while they are bowing to the same embarrassing things. Daddies, I mean, this should insult you. That's why I'm really not seeing that many lean into this, even though the White House will always get a lot of engagement. That's not very much because it's silly. See, it's just, you can work for yourself. But the point is, guys, this is how they view you. They want you to feel that they are they're in control of your lives. They know better. That's paternalism. Now, I interviewed Derek yesterday, called Technocracy's Detachment 201 and the Uniparty's Endless Pursuit of War. It was a great conversation. On that note, I believe tomorrow or the next day, I'll be putting out my interview with Faithless Town for the Revolution Through Music series. It was a great conversation. I'm really enjoying that. I've got Derek lined up actually to talk about his band and some others out there. If you're part of a band that, is trying to expose the truth, reach out to me. Maybe we can get you on to talk about it. But this great conversation, and I'm really understanding Detachment 201, which, if you didn't see, is literally the military. I called it technocracy in uniform. Those are members of Meta, OpenAI, and Palantir, who have now become lieutenant colonels in the military. I don't even understand how this does not get more coverage. Well, I mean, it does. It shows you, like, the classic statement. To look who rules over your life, look to who you're not allowed to criticize. And it's not the same as not allowed, but recognize how often people in the left-right mainstream paradigm will just completely obfuscate a major story. Even though it even gives them seemingly ammunition against the other side, they don't call it out, which we'll get to in a minute. But this, guys, my God, this is what we're all warning about. People at Silicon Valley, high level, like Palantir, not just being a company that they're connected to, but now having military influence, having an actual leadership position. I don't know why this is not the most obvious thing in the world. Now, Orwell points out, to extend that a little further, wait until you realize the owner of Spotify isn't only investing in military drones, but healthcare as well. At least Spotify faces boycott calls over the CEO's investment in AI military startup. Dude, Spotify? Yeah, it doesn't make sense until you realize that all of these companies and all the people connected through them are actually part of some larger agenda. Neko Health, a body scanning AI health startup from Spotify's Daniel Ek, opens in London. Now, whether you think it's connection or the fact that they all just see where the world is going, the question is whether you want that or whether that's where you're being driven for the interest of power structures. Now, let's not forget, or the point is the immigration OS. So you can overlap that with the same conversation of immigration and Palantir and surveillance or every aspect you could possibly see. Now we've got the new ICE mobile app pushing biometric policing on American streets. But it's only about the bad immigrants, though, right? Well, we'll get to what they mean when they say that, which just means anybody that's convenient for them to take right now. You're being played, guys. What this is obvious to me. Whether it's about Palantir and their influence, whether the Palantir Israeli influence in the government, or whether we're talking about the idea that who they're actually using when they go after people aren't even criminals. From every angle you pick, you're being played right now. If you're supporting the government, as Megatron points out, to see where this extends to, U.S. Embassy now wants every visa applicant to list social media usernames for the past 5 years and make their profiles public. Now, right there, you may go, well, it's just for safety, right? Well, guess what? It's in order to check to see if you're anti-Semitic or you just don't support Israel. Now, at one point in history, we might have been like, that can't be true. Except we all know this is where it is right now, as even Rubio and the rest have made it clear you're not allowed to criticize Israel. They try to make it some weird conflation with terrorism. You can be an upstanding member of society, no criminal record, nothing, and simply say Israel's committing genocide, and they will try to remove you from this country. They'll try to put you in jail. They'll try to put you in a concentration camp. It's literally everywhere you look. Here's Alonzo Gramendi. This is from the actual White House account in Peru. The U.S. Embassy in Peru says it is a requirement for student visa applications to set all social media accounts setting to public. So you're not even allowed to have a private life if you want to. So the argument is they're going to try to make this into some security thing. The idea that you think it's the same point that pretending constitutional rights only apply to American citizens. It means you fundamentally don't understand what God-given inherent rights means and the way they outline that any person in many ways in this conversation. But it extends to this point as well. To argue that this is somehow argue that this is not an infringement is to argue that, one, those things are only meant for Americans, which again means you don't understand that, but also to recognize that you're not allowing these people to have any privacy in their lives. And if you think that, oh, it's only going to be them, then you don't know how these things always work, how history always goes. This will eventually become the people that are in this country, which they've already started to do from Israel and from the partisan level. That the other side are secret terrorists. The domestic terrorism push from Biden and Trump. This will eventually, if they wanted to, become your life too. You're not allowed to have a private social media account because, well, maybe you're a secret Russian spy. Maybe you secretly work for Iran. It's where it's going, guys. And I'm telling you, the blind followers out there, the Johnson Jones out there will never they maybe float this out, but then all day, the rest of the week, push it as what's necessary. That's how this tends to work. Call it out. This is not the right direction. Especially if you have principles and you believe what they tell you they actually think. Call out that that's a violation of what they claim they believe in. Now, we talked about immigration in general. We've talked about the free speech overlap. Khalil being an obvious early example, the first, in fact, of somebody who was not a criminal, had no criminal record, and in no way broke any law whatsoever, and they are still trying to remove this man under some claim of national security, even though the judge has ruled quite clearly that they're just basically making this stuff up. Just like with Garcia, we'll get to right now. Doesn't mean they're going to stop trying to go after them because they're, I think, desperate. But I'll include it, the U.S. government's flagrant attack on free speech, and the point was, Ahmed Khalil was just the beginning. I'll also include the conversation of Garcia and all the different court documents that show you exactly the reality, the original claims, and the absolutely frivolous and false. And the next tweet will show you that too, that they lied. Knowingly lied about the entire conversation and now lying again based on the evidence that I can see to try to make him out to be something he's not. The unprecedented gaslighting and lies around Abrego Garcia as well. Oh, and this was just the show we did on the 23rd, and it was specifically about the major loss in the Garcia case. And so that's what we're going to get into next. So this is the show we went over this. We're going to follow up on that major loss and a few other things. So first, just including this again, Melnick points out that every single serious accusation, and we showed you this in the last show, against Mr. Abrego Garcia comes from people who are currently in prison and will be getting out early thanks to giving information on him to the Trump administration. And as the magistrate judge pointed out, their claims at times defy physical reality. Now, Whether or not they're in prison should not immediately prove that that's a lie or not. But it obviously shows you that they could be easily manipulated into giving them what they want to hear in order to get themselves removed from prison. It also turns out that the main guy they're using has been deported like 5 times. And because he's now telling on Garcia as it's being framed, he's not going to be deported this time. So get this. They're the core case that they want you to think they're going after. A criminal with a criminal record has been deported many times. They're allowing to stay in the country, removing them from prison in order to use his claims to go after a person who has no criminal record, who has lived here for years, and is not the example of what they're claiming, despite the narrative they spin. But this guy, they don't need to spin narrative. It's all right there. He's a criminal who should be deported. And they're allowing him to stay to try to deport somebody who is not in that circumstance. It just, everywhere you look, it's blatant. These people are dishonest. They're using what you care about. Stop being too afraid to call it out for those that are. Everyone is beginning to see it. Now, the point is that this guy, on top of that, how are we going to argue that all this time ago, this traffic stop from years ago, is somehow this guy has insight into, I don't need to go over it all again. We went over it the last show and the one before. The point is, even the judge says that this is completely double hearsay. And in the case of what they're claiming now about the trafficking, that based on the way they're claiming this, the hours they put forward, it defies defies physical impossibility, or defies reality, and it says physically impossible. The idea that the hours they listed basically means he had to be driving back and forth every day for weeks straight. It's impossible, but they're going to push it anyway. And I'm willing to bet you it's because of some number they had to think some legal boundary they thought that number met. That's just my gut instinct. But either way, the court literally says, wherever it was, that's what's highlighted right here. The court gives little weight to this hearsay testimony, double hearsay through Special Agent Joseph's testimony. Guys, every judge according to this so far has called this out. But they're going to keep pushing. So here's where this gets most insulting. Justice Department says Kilmore Abrego Garcia will face U.S. trial before any move to deport him will deport him again. First, we're going to put him through trial before we try to deport him. Now, the title doesn't do it any justice to where we're going to read through. The way this actually breaks down, a quick overview actually, is that ultimately he's been brought back, right, to their frustrated government. They've been proven to be wrong. They're embarrassed by it. They're trying to make it look like it's something else. So he comes back. And so now, because he was ordered to be released by the judge, which is another loss for them, the Garcia's representatives pointed to what the U.S. government said, which I'll show you in a second, which is that if you let him go right now, the DOJ argued that ICE is going to arrest him and try to deport him as fast as possible, so you can't let him go. Think about how crazy that is. And so then they made their own decision, and his representatives came back and said, look, basically pled with the judge to keep him in jail in order to not let him be arbitrarily sent to El Salvador or somewhere else. It just shows you how everyone sees how dishonest the way they're acting right now, because nobody says that's okay. They're just trying to get him somewhere other than El Salvador to argue like that doesn't violate the original 2019 withholding of removal. And that somehow wouldn't violate the current reality of due process. They're desperate, guys. And I'm going to show you why when it comes to the MS-13 deal from Bukele, which we've told you already. But I think this is about more than just Garcia. It's about setting this precedent, and it's already beginning to build at their feet. So you'll see what I mean when it's very telling how they dealt with this. Yeah, see, it's right here. Trump DOJ does shocking 180, imploring judge not to release Garcia for fear that ICE will cause irreparable problems by deporting him. Doesn't that just show you the most disjointed reality? The government doesn't even know what the government's doing. I know that's pretty common if you understand government, but guys, it's worse than I've seen in a long time. So this is, glad I had this screenshot. So this is from the 26th, yesterday. So it says, the Justice Department said Thursday that it intends to try Garcia on federal smuggling charges in Tennessee before it moves to deport him. Now, this is what's funny about it as well. The way they're actually framing this is that he's going to be deported no matter what. I think I even have one of these articles. Yeah, it's right here. Where they said 4 days ago, Garcia will never go free after the judge orders his release. They're just showing you they don't care what you're saying. They're just like children who are stomping their feet. My ball, I'm going home kind of a thing. So what they're saying is, excuse me, the Justice Department on Thursday said it intends to try Garcia on federal smuggling charges in Tennessee before it moves to deport him. So why, if you're going to deport him, why would you try to seek charges? I mean, think about the logic of this, right? So let's say you charge him with a crime. Are you going to put him in prison in the U.S.? If that's the case, then what was all this? What was the rest of it all about? If you're going to charge him and then deport him anyway, then it's all a big theater show, because whatever you charge him with here has no bearing on where he goes in another country. There's no mechanism through which he can be held accountable for something this court rules in another country. So it all seems to be more theater. And I think you already know where it's going to go, seeing as how they've already been caught manufacturing every part of this. But it goes on to say, the article itself, it reads, the Justice Department said Thursday it intends to try Garcia on federal smuggling charges before it moves to deport him, addressing fears that he could be expelled again from U.S. within days. The U.S. magistrate judge Barbara Holmes in Nashville recently ruled that he had the right to be released from jail while awaiting trial on the new charges the U.S. government has patched together with basically no evidence. But she decided Wednesday to keep him in custody for at least a few more days over concerns that ICE would swiftly detain him and try to deport him again. Now, that skips over, I think it mentions it further down, that actually comes from the U.S. government arguing that before, and now having Garcia's lawyers take advantage of that when they were arguing from a different place in order to keep him away from them and trying to deport him before all this can come out in court. Now, it might well be that Garcia has insight into this whole MS-13 thing as well, based on whatever reason they tried to get him. I mean, that's my worry, my wonder the entire time. Why did they pick him out? If you don't know what I mean by that, just stay tuned. It's all this one segment, we're going to make this clear. Excuse me, it's trying to clear my throat. All right, so it goes on to say, but she decided Wednesday to keep him in custody. But DOJ spokesperson Chad Gilmartin told Associated Press, told the Associated Press, where did I just lose my spot? There it is, that Garcia will first be tried in court on the charges. Now, this defendant has been charged with horrific crimes, they say. Charged. There's no need to say horrific crimes. Like the idea is they're trying to make, what's funny is if you look at even the facts they're claiming, right, that he had all the people in the car, that at some of these points his kid came along with him, and that you're trying to contort that in the minds of people listening to be human trafficking, which, understand, the technical term, even if it's for labor, would still be human trafficking, but they know what people think. Now, to be real, which we've already gone over, that seems to defy the actual facts, that was what happened. Unless all we're talking about is the fact that he picked up other illegal immigrants to come help work with his boss, which the point is, yes, that will still be a crime. We can engage with that, but that's not what they're actually trying to make this into be. They're trying to claim he abused children. They're trying to claim that this was for something much more nefarious because they want Republicans to be outraged by it. By the way, on a side note, which we'll get into another show, at the same time, you got Donald Trump protecting priests that are out there manipulating children. We'll go into that in another show. Like, it's just everything you think you know about the people is wrong. The point is that horrific crimes, including human trafficking children, you see, which is, even by what they're claiming, that's a wildly deceptive way to frame that, and will not walk free in our country again. Okay, so you have the DOJ saying he will not walk free. So what happens if he gets proven to be innocent? Like, I guess it doesn't matter. So this all feels like a show, doesn't it? Like, it feels like they either know the outcome or they're just trying to tell you that regardless of what happens, we're gonna not let him stay in this country. It says, as Garcia's criminal case has moved forward, concerns grew that he would be swiftly deported upon his release. Now, Diego Garcia's lawyers filed an emergency request Thursday to a federal judge in Maryland to order the government to take Garcia to that state upon release, an arrangement that would prevent his deportation before trial. Well, they would assume. The point is they're trying to keep him in Tennessee, which there's no reason to. They brought him back and sent him to Tennessee because they're just trying to game the system. He's from Maryland. And this Maryland is where the original case comes back to, is even with the withholding of removal. They're just trying to make it seem like it's a whole different thing. And it's lazy. It's not working. Nobody's on that page other than their followers. It says, just so you understand, they're trying to pretend like them bringing him back and charging him for smuggling has nothing to do with the court or the original thing. They're acting like they just discovered new charges and just decided to bring him back because he's a criminal. It's so impossible to believe, because why we would deport him in the first place, or why you'd bring him back. I mean, the idea is he's already in prison, we're being told. They're trying to manipulate everybody. And I guess this is just how bad they are at this. Doesn't surprise me. It says, if this court does not act swiftly, then the government is likely to whisk Garcia away to someplace far from Maryland, wrote his lawyers. Quote, we have concerns that the government may try to remove Garcia quickly over the weekend. That's what one of his attorneys told the judge. And it says, Justice Department Attorney Jonathan Gwynn acknowledged on the call that the U.S. government plans to deport him to a third country that isn't El Salvador, so they claim. But he said there was no timeline for the deportation plans. So what are we talking about? If you already plan to deport him, what happens if he gets found guilty? You're going to deport him anyway? Then what would be the whole point of all of this? And especially if he's found innocent, you're going to deport him anyway? Based on what at that point? There was a withholding of removal for the original charge. And if he's found innocent in this, there's literally no legal standing. But they're going to do it anyway, apparently, because they're desperate. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson posted on Twitter later Thursday, quote, Abrego Garcia was returned to the United States to face trial. That's what they're trying to pretend is what it was about, for the egregious charges against him. People literally want to pretend this guy is a terrorist, gang leader, which despite we're going to get to, they've already dropped the charges to the other leaders, the real ones, not the ones they're pretending are. And it says he will face full force of American justice system, including serving time in American prisons for his crimes. Except you just told us that you were going to deport him either way. It's just cartoonish almost. The judge scheduled a July 7th court hearing in Maryland to discuss the emergency request for the other matters. So I guess that's kind of up in the air. I think he's being held. I'm not sure the way they framed this. I can't tell if he's already been moved to Maryland and they're waiting, or if he's in Tennessee while they wait to decide. And doesn't that meet the same problem? They could just remove him from Tennessee right now. It says Abrego Garcia pled not guilty to the June 13th on the smuggling charges, which is the reality of it. Smuggling is the right way to frame it. They're calling it human child trafficking because they're trying to make it seem worse than it is, which just shows you how dishonest they are. And if characterized as an attempt to justify his mistaken expulsion to a notorious prison. That's what they're doing. They're trying to patch this together to hide what happened. During a court hearing Wednesday, Holmes set specific conditions for Garcia's release that included him living with his brother and a U.S. citizen, which his wife and his kid, the same, in Maryland. But she held off on releasing him over concerns that prosecutors can't prevent ICE from deporting him. So after all of that, and even July 7th being the date when they're going to figure out, apparently they're keeping him in Tennessee in jail as his lawyers asked to make sure that ICE can't sweep him away. Does that sound like a legitimate process to anybody? It's just insane. The kind of America first constitutionalists out there supporting the most anti-American, unconstitutional thing I've ever seen. I shouldn't say ever seen, but very clearly. Now, same thing here. That was the point I already read, that they already said they're never going to go free no matter what. And then Trump admin moves quietly to drop charges against MS-13 leaders, citing other national security priorities. This has to be the most insulting. Oh, of course. Well, we'll read the whole thing. Screw them. All the highlighting went away. President Donald Trump made law and order a key pillar of his campaign, he claims. He believed would be violent gang members he claimed he's going to go after. However, he strengthens his relationship with El Salvador and Bukele, Trump is reportedly willing to drop charges to leaders of one of the most prominent international gangs that hails from Central American country and has been linked to Bukele. We already went over this. Drop Site News and others. Secret Bukele deal lies behind Trump's El Salvador deportations. The point, again, is that he made deals. I mean, even the U.S. government in the past have acknowledged this. He made deals with MS-13 to make it look like there was no crime. That was the big thing they kept telling you. Look, we saved the country. Look at our technocratic Zionist model. We saved everybody. In fact, typically under the technocratic Zionist model, you lie and work with the criminals. And that's what seems to happen. And now the deal might be made public by the fact that they have MS-13 members about to be brought into court in the U.S. And people might start asking because it's actually public when it comes to the records, and they might say, hey, what about your deal with him? And they might answer those questions for deals of their own. And so they're secretly trying, maybe that was what this all was about, at least in Bukele's perspective. Remember in the beginning, they tried to send a lot of the people and women, and they were just like, that we can't take them. You know, like Trump, they were trying to dump so many people over there. The point, though, is that at least the first original 200 plus, over 75% of them had no criminal record. And many of them, the majority, in fact, were here legally. Visa, green card, withholding of removal, in the process of some kind of hearing for something. All of them were here legally. in the group I'm talking about. There's a vast majority of the people we're discussing. And since then, it's been basically the same. But my point is just that first grouping, it was about 75% you could prove. According to a new report from El Faro, an outlet extremely critical of Bukele, the president has seemingly convinced Trump to drop charges against leaders of MS-13, who had been accused of terrorism and ordered to be prosecuted during the first Trump term. If the charges are dropped, a Republican president would also be tossing the work of Vulcan, a joint task force with great fanfare announced in 2019 as a unit specifically designated to combat MS-13, bringing together the DHS, several federal agencies, and 10 prosecutor offices, which had operated in 5 countries. Notably, the joint task force's work led to the capture of 9 leaders of MS-13, all Salvadorians, accused of narco-terrorism, human trafficking, murders committed in the U.S., planning the assassination of an FBI agent, and more. Though the administration has reportedly operated quietly to drop the charges against the leaders, some moves have already been seen. More recently, interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, John J. Durham, asked the Eastern District Court of New York to drop the charges publicly on record against 2 of the 9 MS-13 leaders. And that's enough right there. You're telling me you're dropping charges against MS-13 leaders while you're literally trying to charge somebody that doesn't have evidence to be such as a leader of MS-13? Yeah, just like I said, you're being played. Now, he lists off the names. One of them is known as Vampiro. It says in both cases, Durham argued before the court, publicly on record, that there were more important geopolitical and national security considerations than holding these gang members accountable for the crimes of which they were accused. Are you kidding me? You realize that that's like the core push? Like, they're the ones telling you that this was the mandate. You all asked for this immigration push. And now they're telling the court that that's the least, that's not the most important thing. Holding these gang members accountable. You've literally destroyed the fabric of this country in many ways to go after people who are not members of the gang that you claim are members of the gang. And yet here you are removing this. I mean, this is just hard to make up. New York prosecutors did not explain to the court that what considerations had prevailed in the decision, I'm sure you can imagine, nor how relations with El Salvador would be harmed if Vampiro's deportation were made public. It also remains unclear what national security motives the Trump administration had to drop the charges against these leaders. Probably because, as I think, they're working with El Salvador, which is where they're going to go. This is what this really comes back to. Understand, we've already seen one of these examples. Remember, we talked about this a couple months ago, where Pam Bondi dropped the charges on one of these MS-13 leaders and deported them to El Salvador. Same thing we said then. It's either because they wanted it to appear there were actual gang members going, or probably both, and that this person had made a deal with El Salvador and Bukele and did not want that coming out in court. I mean, ask yourself, do you really think they're going to be held accountable? They had worked this case. They spent tax dollars. They had him nailed to the wall. He was going to go to jail. And instead of serving time for a criminal, they send him back to El Salvador where he'll probably live like a king. That's the world we're living in right now, while destroying the lives of people that are not part of the gang. It says some experts in El Salvador assert that the deals are part of a quid pro quo between Bukele and Trump's government to avoid forcing those MS-13 leaders to testify about Bukele's power-sharing deals with organized criminal groups. The Los Angeles Press reported, Bukele's close relationship with Salvadorian criminals and gang members is an open international secret. It is. But you see, you get this whole Elon Musk mainstream alternative media kind of drown out every other voice kind of push that we saw it during Haiti. We saw it during Venezuela's election. We saw it with drones and fog. We saw it. Now, Musk has taken a weird backseat lately, but the whole thing is still there, right? The idea that when this was going on, that's what was happening. People were trying to say, look, he's made deals with them, that they're working with the gangs. No, but all the, whatever you want to call them, the tech bros, what are the names you have for these people? We're out there going, he's a new hip guy, the cool dictator. He's saving the world from their stupid woke Democrat policies. You remember it all. When the reality turns out to be he's an absolute criminal that made deals with the criminals that you claim he stopped. But who cares about the facts, right? Don't let it get in the way of your narrative. Now, just aside from this part of it, this is something that from my research is very clear. As they say, it is an open international secret. Now, last month, Carlos Cargina Lopez, one of the most recognized gang leaders in El Salvador, whose charges were recently dropped, in his home country, gave a 41-minute interview to Alfaro where he detailed how his gang, as well as other criminal organizations, allegedly helped the president rise to power. You know, exactly what all the rest of the data points have already shown, and what Dropsite News has very, very well outlined. It says, Oscar Martinez, editor-in-chief of Alfaro and co-author of the article, told El País that, quote, this interview describes how gangs turned Bukele into a relevant politician. You don't think Trump knows that? Guys, they're working with these people for that reason, in my opinion. That's who these people are. It's might makes right. There is nothing sacred to striving for power. It allows us to reach the stark conclusion, he says, that it is impossible to understand Bukele's rise to total power without his association with gangs. That's enough. If it wasn't even more so, the very gangs that your current administration are using to go after innocent people. I mean, this is the most insulting part of this. And on top of all of it, that you could quite literally prove, as we've already gone over, this is not brand new. This is from May 14, 2025. Bukele's El Salvador dictatorship made in Israel. The guy's a proud Zionist, guys. I'm trying to tell you, we're watching a massive shift take place, and it is currently being called out and seen. And my God, if you can't, I mean, the reason it may be overwhelming is to recognize, like, it can't be that we're seeing it everywhere. Yeah, it can, guys. This is what's been going on for a very long time. Zionism has worked its way through like a parasite to everything we're talking about. And if you think that means only Jewish people, you're not paying attention. Homegrowns are next. Don't forget that part of it. Trump hopes to deport and jail U.S. citizens abroad. Yeah, that drifted away. But 5 times he floated the idea of sending American citizens to these prisons, you know, if they break the law or whatever law they claim was broken, like we're seeing today. And even then, if you think that's okay, then you just don't understand the basic fundamental things of this country. Right in front of you. Now, some points that I don't want you to miss in this conversation. Christopher Webb, who I'm not familiar with, I'm following him because he's been putting out some things like this since this immigration conversation. I always want to point it out, though, whether or not I know someone in their work and their connections, which really, as always, the point is, it doesn't matter. To me, I show you, if I don't care if this was Ben Shapiro, the point is that it's correct, then I'll show it to you, as I've made clear many times more so than ever in the last recent, probably 6 months, but it's important. That just the truth matters. But either way, Christopher Webb here points out that ICE at Home Depot on Sunset this morning, and you can watch the clip, it's them just going after people waiting to work, you know, whatever you think they are. Sidebar, it says, yesterday I said to my friend in East LA, at some point these masked anonymous ICE agents are going to roll up on the wrong people and get capped. Now, before you freak out about that, the reality is exactly what we're going to hear from Congress, because it is the right point to make here. Why in the world would you as an American assume that a masked person with no identification is automatically authority? That's the whole problem. In fact, you know what? Let's just do this first. I was going to play this later on. This is the clip I'm referencing. Check this out. This is Pam Bondi literally trying to pretend like she doesn't know that they're wearing masks, despite the fact that it's already been proven that they were ordered to. And in fact, in front of other congressional meetings, they were in fact defending that because the Democrats want to attack them. But yet here she is, being as dishonest as they can be, because that's who they are. They'll lie right to your face because I don't know whether, in my opinion, Bondi's not smart enough to be in the know about what's really going on. She's not making decisions, not really, in my opinion. And I think she's proven that, like Noam and the rest of them. It's embarrassing. The point is they think they do in a lot of ways. And I think that they're so charged up on the idea that the left is always lying about everything to where they can't be honest because that gives them whatever that binary childish mindset is. So I'm not saying it's okay. What I'm saying is I can understand why she might be manipulated into thinking that she has to lie about everything. But they're all liars. That's the point. And guess what? She's lying and she knows she's lying in this clip.
My question for you, Attorney General Bondi, is given the number of DOJ employees currently conducting immigration enforcement activities in support of DHS, how are you going to ensure that the safety...
Quick point to start, and I'll let it play all the way through. Don't forget, as Melnick pointed out, that they moved many different groups, even of different agencies, over to help them go after immigrants, many of which are not criminals. One of the main things they stopped going after was child trafficking, was like pedophile rings. That's quite literally on the record. They pulled away from the groups that would focus on that and directed them towards largely immigration. Now, you may agree with that, but interesting seeing as how that conversation has been highlighted as important, and it is, by no more than the right. Now, it's not. And we'll get into the point about Trump, and I mentioned there's articles coming out about the whole overlap with the Catholic Church, but we'll get into it. It's not new. It's not unique to the left or right. It's just simply that people in power lie. Kenny told you that.
Of the public and the off-day employees currently conducting immigration enforcement activities in support of DHS. How are you going to ensure that the safety of the public and the officers, if they continue to not follow required protocol to identify themselves as law enforcement?
And Senator Peters, that's the first time that issue has come to me about them.
Seriously?
You're saying that law enforcement officers, when they cover their faces.
Right.
I do know that
who's totally not buying that really, really poor acting.
they are being doxxed, as you said. They're being threatened. Their families are being threatened. You know, it's
Again, I get that, but they have to identify themselves.
By law.
There is an insignia oftentimes. They have to identify themselves as law enforcement.
Right.
People think, here's a person coming up to me, not identified, covering themselves. They're kidnapping. They'll probably fight back. That
Right.
endangers the officer
And you'd be legally okay to do so, despite how they might treat you and what they might try to follow up with.
as well. And that's a serious situation. People need to know that they're dealing with a federal law enforcement official.
Senator, I would be happy to look at that issue with you and talk to all of our partner law enforcement agencies. But I can assure you that if they're covering their faces now, it's to protect themselves. But they also want to protect all citizens. And that's something we can work together on to ensure the safety of everyone and their families.
Yeah. And it's protecting themselves too if they identify themselves. It's not just the person, because
Yeah, she's saying you're wrong, though. Like, it's like the mask is not wearing it is protecting everybody. See, her implication is that everyone's out to get them, which that maybe that's the case today because of all that they're doing. Irrelevant of that is that it's the law and they're required to. And by not wearing it, it proves to people that they are what they claim they are and are identifying themselves, which then would alleviate the risk, because if you don't know that's them, then you're more likely to get attacked. But see, they contort it. They invert it into something completely different for the benefit of their agenda, which is the Stasi, Gestapo.
Someone's going to fight back if you just think a strange person with their face covered
It sounds
throwing
like
you into a van. Most people will resist that.
It sounds like you have a specific case, and I would
We will have
happy
those.
to talk to you about that at a later time, because I'm not aware of that happening. But I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
We'd be happy to do it. I appreciate that.
It's just so gross. And that's always how this goes too. The fake back and forth of Congress. They point to them, oh, we'll get back to you with documents, and nothing ever changed. It's all theater, in my opinion, whether they know that or not. The point is, Big Jordan guy here says, this is among the most shameless and nefarious administrations of all time. In the most modern age we live in, the cameras in everyone's pockets with hundreds of thousands of videos of masked ICE people with no badges or identifications, insignia online. Pam Bondi is playing dumb, which we all know. Now, I wouldn't argue it's the most nefarious. I think it's just the continuation of the same nefarious government we've been dealing with our entire lives. The problem, though, is that it's become more extreme, and I think it's because of obvious influences we've been discussing. Bottom line, you know she knows, guys. They've already addressed it. And so for her to sit there and act like she doesn't know is insulting to you. She's insulting anybody out there who thinks she's being honest. She's playing. Now, the problem is there's a lot of Republicans who are bought into the Democrat evil mindset. So they're going, yeah, lie to them because they're trying to trick you. They're all trying to trap you, Pam, and we know you're on the right side. That's childish logic. Even if you agree with that, all you're really doing is do the bad thing too, because they did it first. Welcome to kindergarten, guys. We've been overtaken by absolute political children. Senator Gary Peters points out to turn up to Pam Bondi that ICE agents have been covering their faces and failing to identify themselves, to which she says, that's the first time that's come to me. Despite you can literally prove that she's addressed it before. They've talked about it before. I mean, it's just so insulting. So back to this clip. It says, yesterday I said to my friend, at some point, these masked anonymous ICE agents, something's going to happen to them. She says that she was told ICE is purposely avoiding the gang areas for their own safety, which in fact has been backed up by plenty of other things. So that says it all. Trump claimed he'd go after criminals and big talk about deporting gangs, which we just addressed, seeing as how they're not, but they're out here targeting workers and families, whether illegal or not. Look, let's be clear. The law is, if you're here illegally, that's the law. That's not even to get into the ideological, the difference of like beyond a state of society, which my opinions on. But since we're in the state of society and the Constitution exists, which I argue within that is the best potential block or check and balance on people in power, the idea is if you're out there targeting families, if you're out there, like it says Trump claimed he'd go after criminals and big talk about deporting gangs, but they're out there targeting workers and families. Yes, the law matters. That's what I was getting at, is that yes, within that it matters. But the bottom line is that if they're going after only, I'm trying to just frame it the best way, the lowest hanging fruit. One, that's not what you were promised, right? You were the gangs, the criminals, the terrorists, the rapists, which is how they framed everyone. And on top of that, there are people that are actually here legally that they're wrapping up, people that are not criminals. And then on top of that, people that are in the middle of potential processes. So they're going after the lowest possible hanging fruit. And in many cases are wrapping up innocent Americans too, or veterans, or on and on and on. So this, as he says, is a hoodwink. He also points this out. He says, federal agents blew the door off of this house. A dozen, and the video's right here. You can hear it, but I don't have the video downloaded. You can see it from the Ring camera. The point is, a dozen federal agents blasted their way into a Los Angeles home where Jenny Ramirez lives with her boyfriend and 2 kids. She heard the blast while checking on her 6-year-old with her 1-year-old in her arms. It says Ramirez says everyone in the house is a U.S. citizen. Agents told her they were looking for her boyfriend. Later that morning, he called to say Border Patrol told him to turn himself in, possibly over a crash a week earlier where he rear-ended a truck carrying federal agents. So apparently, even regardless of being legally, if you, this is where we're at. People can be here on legal visas, and they'll do something they dislike, and they'll revoke it and claim, well, tickets or, people who are abiding by the law. And yet you get these sycophant people cheering it on because they pretend they're all rapists and terrorists because that's what Trump said. He says, I can't speak for every city, but I can speak to what's happening here in LA. ICE bounty hunters aren't going after gang members or dangerous criminals, which, let's be clear, this has been backed up by many reports, including their own statistics. And it says they're targeting the vulnerable, the easy pickings, gardeners, street vendors, day laborers, some of which may be here legally, which, yes, then there's a process to go through, and yes, they should be held accountable for the law. I'm never arguing otherwise. My point, though, is that this is not what you think is happening. In fact, in many cases, the one they're grabbing is here legally. Or the point is they're not going after the people that they should be, the one they promised. It says people just trying to survive because it's quick money and low risk. Folks need to stop pretending ICE is cleaning up crime. That's not what's happening. You've seen the videos of the man beaten by ICE. Now listen closely. He describes the same stuff. Let me give you some examples. This is just Joe Rogan even called this out, which just shows you how people are all over the map are seeing this. He says the Trump's effing nuts ICE raids. I don't think anyone would have signed up for that. His point, he says podcaster and comedian Joe Rogan called out Donald Trump's immigration crackdown, saying the administration latest ICE raids are effing nuts and not what Americans expected when they voted for this, which is important because they'll scream constantly, like Stephen Miller will tell you what you're supposed to think. This is what you voted for. I don't agree with that, other than the people that will say that no matter what. Trump's second-term immigration agenda has led to sweeping ICE raids across U.S. cities, while the administration insists it's targeting criminals. Critics point to data showing the majority of detainees have no criminal record. Guys, we've gone over this personally. It's obvious. That's not to say that people who are here illegally shouldn't be removed. That's how they try to conflate them. The point is, you can prove, as I keep repeating, no criminal record and here legally in many cases. But both of those things matter. And it goes on to say the number of non-criminal immigration arrests has surged by 800%. Understand, non-criminal. And in some cases here legally, but either way, non-criminal, 800%. So that's doubling down, as Miller said, go to the Home Depots and 7-Elevens on the people who are not criminals. It said, like people that are literally waiting to work and going to work at restaurants despite Trump's thing, which he apparently pulled back on. I think I've got it lined up. It says pushing the detention record above over 50,000 in many places that aren't even equipped to hold that many. The methods ICE are using go far beyond what voters were led to believe. That was what Joe Rogan. So here is a couple of reports that I think you should see. ICE detains a record 56,397 people, the majority without criminal convictions. That's 4 days ago. That's this week. Realize this is a new report. The past one I told you, that's why I emphasized that from the original, sending all the people back to Venezuela, or rather El Salvador. Most of them weren't even from there. Most of them didn't have criminal records. Most of them were here legally. Same thing now. 56,000 plus people, the majority without criminal records. ICE detains U.S. Army interpreter at routine asylum hearing. Right. So the point is about the fact that they're in a process. Now, whether you agree with the fact that they're abusing it or not, the point is this is a guy who's literally working with the U.S. military. So, I mean, at what point do we recognize that this is about nothing other than numbers on a page and people that are easy to abuse? And in fact, the point again is while they're working with the leaders of leaders of gangs in more than one circumstance, guys, we've seen this point with Israel and U.S. overlap with the cartels. We've seen this point with MS-13. We've seen this with Trent de Aragua, which was apparently, as I understand it, literally created in L.A. I mean, it's everywhere you look. They're not what they appear to be. They are the mafiosos. ICE detains Marine veteran's wife at green card interview. Right. So in the process of seeking it legally, what they're telling you we should all do, that's what they're supposed to do. And so you're going after them because they're currently she currently doesn't have a green card. That's it. That's the only reason. Married to a veteran, 9-week-old baby. Get her out of here. Oh yeah, you MS-13 leader, go ahead and go back and work with Bukele and we'll drop the charges. It's pretty obvious. Texas man, born on U.S. Army base, abroad, deported to a country he's never been to and left stateless. Texas man. I mean, we have to see where we are, guys. A U.S. citizen born and abroad at an army base. Like they're going after anybody. In some of these cases, getting wrapped up with people that don't deserve it. They don't care. ICE arrest Trump supporter with pregnant wife during mass roundup of Iranians. So you see how this is involved? So now it's on the Iran. It's like back to World War II. Rounding up Japanese people because they're Japanese. They've literally arrested a bunch of Iranians. And then you got all the morons out there like the Kirks of the world and Johnson's going, or DC Drano, the Iranian sleeper cells, which we should consider obviously possible, but don't facts matter anymore? And of course, the guy who had a literal army ID card on him. I mean, I'll get to that point in a second, actually. I have a thought about it. I think it's right here. But the bottom line, in the process of just what seems to just be a bunch of Iranian people, they just wanted to make it seem like they're just going after whoever they want to with no real justification. And one of them being a Trump supporter, which whether that matters to you or not, I mean, I think it does for the context that people thought that, he's over here going, I'm a Trump supporter. I'm a legal person. I happen to be Iranian. I believe that they're going to do the right thing. They go out and guess who that Trump supporter is? You'll probably be surprised to find out it's the guy they were pointing to. That guy is a Trump supporter. He voted for Trump. He believes in Trump. And he even has here's my thought, though. I get the sense that this is an operation entirely. Like this guy is like we've seen him many times over where Mossad will dress up and act like whoever they want, or the U.S. government for that matter. And the point was they caught him apparently with a Islamic Republic of Iran ID. And I simply said, okay, because it's customary for sleeper cell operatives to carry military identification. Okay, so look, consider things, right? But facts matter. So are you just arresting people because they're Iranian, or even if you're in the Iranian military? I mean, are we not allowed to travel anywhere when you're in the military now? What's the implication that makes this person a potential threat? Because they tell you Iran's a threat. Now, look, obviously, what about if you're in the UK military? What about the Israeli military? Clearly, those people are in Congress. Or the Chinese military. I'm sure we can point out examples where people exist and they can enter this country even though they're from other military. So this is because they decided to make it a case. Now, it could be more than that. To this point, I see no other evidence other than the implication that because Iranian, therefore guilty. Seems pretty flimsy, if you ask me. And I think it's about trying to create this case. Now, the reason I said I think it's an operative thing, one, he's got his ID on him that I think is interesting. But on top of that, if you read the article about him, he basically makes the argument about how, Trump's going to save us from the evil Iran. Now, look, there are people that believe that. But from my experience, it's very few and far between in actual Iranians that are in that country and believe in Iran. What's interesting, though, is this whole thing. I'll read some of these points here. He says, ICE arrested the supporter of Donald Trump, who this other supporter of Donald Trump want you to believe is some Iranian sleeper cell. During a mass roundup of Iranians, they just went after Iranians over the weekend, probably to make that case. Boasting on social media that he is now being processed for deportation. We arrested Kibvar Karimi for an immigration violation. Now it says, however, in a Wednesday interview with Newsweek, his heavily pregnant wife told the magazine that he'd supported Trump and his immigration policies. And it says, pray to the world to free the Iranian people. It says, while Khamenei was arrested for failing to adjust his immigration paperwork, his wife claimed the documents had simply been completed and were ready to file. and that they had been planning to send it in after she had given birth. So same thing. Another Trump supporter, if you believe this, to take it at face value, simply because they had like a couple day lapse between a paperwork. They're taking every excuse they can get. I honestly think this was about just taking advantage of things that were there, and it very well could just be a manipulation. Maybe he's a propaganda. It's up for you to decide. The point is this what you think you were promised? And if all you care about are names and faces with certain colors, then you don't really care about the real point of this. The idea of the potential immigrant, like the idea is that you just want, I think this stems back to a racial situation where about certain people are allowed and certain people aren't. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is being driven by the loomer, like the Zionism influence in this country. Here is another MAGA supporter that we've already talked about. Green card holder detained by ICE at immigration appointment. This person was he's a MAGA person who voted for Trump and basically had one issue from, I think, almost a decade ago. A paperwork miscommunication, they called it. And apparently, as far as I can tell, he's still in jail. If it matters more to you, he's a white guy, supports Trump, has no criminal record. But if that's who Trump promised you he was going to arrest, then just explain that to everybody else and why that makes sense. He was not here illegally. Let's not forget as well that Trump is stifling the National Guard soldiers that he sent to LA to create the illusion that we were in some kind of a revolution, right? That they apparently stiffing them. We already told you that. There's a Norwegian tourist who was just detained by ICE and then sent home. You know why? For having a J.D. Vance meme on his phone. Literally making fun of the vice president now is apparently reason enough to remove you from this country. These are children. And that's not constitutional in any sense. Now, back to the original point, which is why I had it over here, with her and the masking and whether they're going to help people are going to get hurt. We've seen, at least 3 examples so far. There's 2 examples I've seen of people breaking into to stores and robbing them using an ICE jacket. Here, this is from the 5th, this is from February, but there's been multiple examples of this. Multiple ICE impersonation arrests made during nationwide immigration crackdown. The point is, we're not even getting reports on this, guys. I promise you, there are people all over who are pretending to be ICE and taking advantage of people. I've seen many examples. And you know why that's possible? Because they pretend they don't know that they're being ordered to break the law. No warrants, no identification. It's unconstitutional. But please explain to me why this is what you wanted. Republicans urge Trump to revoke citizenship of Zohran Mamdani. Now, I wasn't going to talk about it, but I put it off. I just don't like the idea of support. I've seen this. This might as well be a Gabbard situation, right? Where she comes on the scene and she's all big talk about anti-war. And I'm not saying we should disregard. I like what he's been saying, but I'm done leaning in and promoting people to only turn a U-turn when it suits their interests, because that's what politics are. Right. But I will point to him and say, I agree with what he said, because that's my point. Right. If he is the newest opportunist that's stepping up and saying, I believe these things because it'll get him elected, then good. Show other politicians that using the truth will get them elected, but just don't hold them accountable. Question all they say, but hold out hope that maybe he believes what he's saying. I'd love for that to be the case. The point is, this guy got elected, and now you got the Loomers and Drano, everyone else, everyone we've mentioned, who are all unilateral, like all at the same time, coming out and going, remove Muslims from Congress, like just in the most disgusting fashion, showing you what they really are. Why? Because he disagrees with the Palestinian stance. Now, according to whoever, Johnson, I think, because he's jihadist now, because he doesn't support your stance on Israel. Like, talk about being not America first, when this guy is literally standing on the principles that we found are foundationally part of this country. Now, question him like you would anybody, guys. I just think it's insulting that we can't be honest about these kind of things. Now, Gaza. Again, that I don't want you to miss. There are things that I wanted to make sure we can include it in the conversation. And this is just a couple of overlapping points. And then one that's really important that I was going to put in the title, but I decided not to. This is from Haaretz, from today. Quote, it's a killing field. IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid. Deliberately. Which shouldn't surprise anybody, guys. We've had so many whistleblowers come out from their government and say, we were ordered to kill. We told that we're bringing down buildings just to bring down buildings. That's from the 972 article. All right? Here's just the IDF opening clip that I've played many times from one of these whistleblowers.
Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably.
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about the reality he says he witnessed.
What kind of stuff would they say?
There are no uninvolved, only unarmed. This is something that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life.
So here, Wyatt Reed points out some developments that are relevant to the larger conversation, but in particular with Gaza. Insane detail here. Israel pays contractors $1,500 for every house in Gaza they destroy, which now explains a little bit more about why it's so, you see these bulldozers rolling through the destroyed Gaza and just tearing down streets and tearing down homes. They've always been doing this. They've always had designs on the territory, which guess what? Most of us have been telling you, for those that haven't been paying attention. The contractors, quote, act like a kind of sheriff and demolish whatever they want along the front. From their perspective, any moment where they don't demolish houses is a loss of money. So from day one, and long before October 7th, they've been doing this, guys. And just October 7th forward, and the massive destruction just allowed them to just systematically go through and destroy it, destroy it, destroy. Acting like the whole time we were just looking for Hamas. Like, you can quite literally prove that everything they were saying was false today. Literally, based on their actions, their precedent, and what you can clearly see. Still, the people that act like they're on your side will not tell you the truth because they're not on your side. Here, WikiLeaks points out, Israel's message must be repeated ad infinitum until the people get it. That's a quote from Hollywood producer Glenn D. Fegg, revealed in WikiLeaks Israel files, which we've shared before. Top U.S. firm executives secretly worked with Israel to defend war crimes in Gaza. Here's a Mint Press News article. Point is, guys, they've been in lockstep left and right to defend this from the very beginning. Here's Haaretz, leading Israeli newspaper. Israeli Jews think that attacking a hospital is a war crime, unless the IDF does it. From the horse's mouth, as it were. Glenn Greenwald, day after day after day, innocent life extinguished by the world's most moral army, using U.S. money and weapons to do it. This time, again, slaughtering an American teenager. Not a joke. Probably the 15th. I'm talking about just Gaza and like the post-October 7th point. Even NPR wrote the article that there were hundreds of Americans in Gaza, and some of which were just Americans that happened to marry somebody. And nobody cared about them. Not the corporate media that were all up in arms and all the Jews that were, despite the fact that now we know the IDF killed most of them. That's the Hannibal Directive. The point is that constantly you see examples like this, where an American citizen is being killed or trapped. And it just shows you no one life should matter to you or me or more than anybody else. Lives matter. The point is that your governments who care, who pretend they're America first, don't care about this. That is such an obvious point for the ones screaming America first while watching Israel kill an American and don't care. Or, like we said in the past, having somebody like Joe Meters, a U.S. Liberty veteran, get arrested by Israel and held for months and nobody says a word. They don't care about Americans, guys. They care about their interests over everything else. Right now, those are clearly Zionist interests. So as he points out, another American, a teenager, was killed in the West Bank, slowly turning the West Bank into Gaza. Same motives.
Family of a Palestinian boy with ties to Chicago say he was gunned down by Israeli Defense Forces this week.
They tell us this 13-year-old was playing with his cousins in the West Bank when he was killed. New tonight at 10, our Marissa Sulik was with his family and friends in the southwest suburbs as they honored him.
A Nazah, or an Islamic gathering to offer condolences, brought dozens of people through these doors here in Bridgeview. Most did not know Amar Hamayal, but that didn't stop them from coming here to honor a boy they say had so much ahead of him. Each man who comes inside this room is here to mourn a boy who lived on the other side of the world. A boy who has a profound impact on what families here and in the West Bank are dealing with.
We gather here today not just to mourn, but to bear witness.
Marwan Cartoon says Amar Hamayal was his cousin.
He's a truly example of a kind person.
He was smart, positive, and a proud member of the Palestinian Muay Thai national team, a combat or martial arts sport.
He's a 13-year-old boy, just a kid, who was shot, left bleeding, as help was denied.
Cartoon says Amar was shot in the neck by IDF. He received no first aid, and his body was on the ground for hours. He was then carried across his small village in the West Bank. Everyone gathering to say goodbye to the boy, as Cartoon says the area suffocates under Israeli military occupation.
We see this every day.
Can you believe that he says? Like, the intellectual dishonesty of these absolute clowns. It's not, guys, you can verify. Like, there's no one in the world that argues, except maybe Pompeo, that tried to momentarily say that it's not inconsistent with international law, the West Bank occupation. Everybody other than Israel tells you that it's illegal. We've known it's been illegal. It's been illegal the entire time. That's why Miriam Adelson paid Trump $200 million to allow them to do so. And clearly they are. The point is to say that he says it's occupied is such a coward's move. They know what they're doing, and that's what these people always do. CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN. Also, don't miss the fact they started with ties to Chicago. Oh, you mean an American citizen? Monsters.
Palestine, especially, in West Bank and Gaza.
Hassan Boyrat says this has become an all too familiar scene in his home country. We spoke with the Mars family in the West Bank about this.
2 months ago, it happened with us, with a 14-year-old boy, and he carried a U.S. citizen, and they shot him the same exact way.
These are our families.
And while what happened to Ammar is thousands of miles away, here in Chicago, his family and friends do not want who he was and how he died to go unnoticed.
We remember Ammar not only with sorrow, but with a vow, to speak out his name, to share his story, and to demand justice.
We reached out to the IDF, the Israeli embassy, and the consulate to confirm if this happened. The consulate got back to us saying they are unfamiliar with the case, but they would reach out to people overseas and get back to us. In Bridgeview.
Which they never will. Have you ever seen them? This is the false follow-up report. They'll never follow up, ever even mention again. I'm willing to bet you at the moment they were done, they never even planned to. That's corporate media for you. It really is just sickening to see how blatantly dishonest this is. Thank you, Glenn, for pointing it out. Now here, just in case you were confused about the possibility of that, here's Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper from today. It's a killing field. This is in Gaza, you understand. So, I mean, the West Bank is the same situation, despite there's clearly different, current situations. I mean, the West Bank is just I would argue, just about to become, like Glenn was pointing out, but this is nothing new. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Gaza is the open air prison dynamic where they claim they're not in control, but they're absolutely in control from the outside. West Bank is the same thing, but they control it all the way through. And then now slowly they are occupying more and more to the point. I mean, they already occupy all of it. They control it, but they're slowly removing them, ethnic cleansing these areas and dumping them into some new place and demolishing the homes, stealing from people. I mean, the settlers are out there raping and torturing and murdering. That's not hyperbolic. There's reports just like this that show you what they're doing. They've been called out by everybody, including people inside of Israel. IDF officers and soldiers told Haaretz they were ordered to fire at unarmed crowds near food distribution sites. I mean, I don't know what else we need to see here. So if they're ordered to fire innocent people, then shocker, they've been lying to you the entire time, which is the obvious reality, guys. Here's even German media. German media, of all places, should blow your mind. It's a battlefield. Israeli soldiers received orders to shoot at the starving. That's German media. They've been more lockstep with Israel than anybody else. UNRWA, Gaza, the new aid distribution system has become a killing field. Over 400 starving people reported killed since it started operating. What did they say in the beginning? You're making it all up. You're lying about that. Then when people lost attention, they were shooting them every single day. This is disgusting. On top of that, there's reports now that they're putting drugs in the food that they do get. And if you even for 1 second balk at this possibility, you just have not been paying attention. Question everything, of course. But guys, this happens constantly in everything they do, whether it's in the beginning, they argued whether with the water or everything else they were doing, that if they got them sick, that everything would go much faster. And they all leaned into that. I mean, the point is, I could prove to you over the years they've done things like this, whether experimentation, in this case, evidence coming out that they have put drugs in the flour that they're using. I mean, it doesn't stop. Drop site news with yet another report from yet another doctor telling you what we've all been telling you.
And we're reporting since midnight, 41 Palestinians have been gunned down. Yesterday, on Monday, Israeli forces killed at least 71 Palestinians, including 50 people waiting to receive aid. Can you explain? You have been treating some of the people who were injured. What are their injuries? What is happening?
Thanks, Amy. You know, we're seeing a very predictable pattern shortly after the so-called aid distribution centers open. We just get, we hear ambulances flying towards the hospital, private vehicles, donkey-drawn carts bringing in people, streams after streams of people. They often have isolated gunshot wounds to their head, to their neck, in the very center of their chest. There's very high lethality, so a large percentage of the patients that come in are already dead. And then we kind of move quickly, transition quickly to the next patient. We're seeing lots of, children, adolescents, teenagers. We're seeing, some older people, but it's really more execution style than the typical blast injuries that we see, which tend to be more systemic, like head, neck, chest, and abdomen with shrapnel. And these are really isolated, targeted types of injuries that are much more consistent with the firsthand reports that we're getting. And a lot of the video that we're watching from the so-called food distribution centers where, it's kind of like a perverted Squid Games where they're given a certain period of time to get the aid. And if there's any chaos, then, they just start opening fire. And then we see it in our facility, 20, 30 minutes later.
And Doctor,
so this is no different than the Flower Massacre or anything else we've talked about, guys. And let's not forget the Gaza Health Foundation, or whatever it's called, the GF, that's proven, admitted by themselves to be funded by Mossad. This is an Israeli operation. And the point is, despite what the numbers they're claiming, they don't even count Palestinians shot en route to the distribution as sites, as casualties of this model. Everywhere you look, guys, the evidence is clear. I'll include the long list of doctors I've already highlighted, showing you all the same stuff, reporting all the same stuff, point blank telling you they're watching Israel murder people in front of them. Here is Mark Carney of Canada saying he would not recognize a Palestinian state unless it was Zionist. It just gets more cartoonish by the day. And it says, in doing so, this is Canadians for Justice and Peace in Middle East. In doing so, Carney is asking Palestinians to adopt the political ideology, not the fake argument that it's about the home of the Jews. That's not the truth. You can ask a whole lot of Orthodox Jewish communities today. So if they disagree, at the very least, you can't claim that like only racist people think that. There are Jewish communities all over that are telling you that. I just played from a very famous rabbi telling you that you're being lied to. The point is, you're asking them to adopt the political ideology of their oppressors as a precondition for self-determination. It's just wild. Like, they violate their own standards by making these kind of arguments, or the illusion of their standards. Now, the idea of the false flag with Iran, and we'll end with this discussion, the idea of Iran, what's going on with Israel, and the claim from Tehran Times of a potential false flag that was foiled. Interesting. So this seems to have spread quite far, and it comes from this website, which I've personally seen things come through here that I know aren't true. So question everything as always. Exclusive, Israel planned false flag operation on U.S. soil. If there's ever been something that is easy to digest, like the idea of that possibility is, it's not just because that's what you think about them. Their track record is undeniable, as well as the U.S. government, guys. It's almost as a matter of, what's the right word? Not policy, but if you look at a situation, the usual reality is that they had some kind of nefarious purpose. Now, that's not, again, my opinion. Look at the history. If you're honest about the track record, it's more often than not, they're lying to you in some nefarious way, some deceptive dynamic to try to drive you in a certain direction. Even if it's like a reactive, we'll use this, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is from Tehran Times. It says the plan involved orchestrating a destructive event, and the article is from the 25th of June. Orchestrating a destructive event within the United States and fabricating evidence to implicate Iran, thereby manipulating American public opinion and prompting military action. Sounds like it makes sense based on what we've seen coming. I have more, by the way. I wouldn't just this article alone would be enough for me. Iran uncovered the Israeli plot through information shared by a friendly nation, which they don't really seem to identify. Upon learning of the potential attack, Iranians sent messages to the U.S. officials and prevented the planned explosion from occurring. Interesting way that's written, though, like, because it's a few things. To just for sake of conversation, take this at face value. So the argument being is that first, Iran uncovered the Israeli plot through information shared by a friendly nation. So one consideration is that that's the U.S. elements that don't want this outcome, but that would be weird to frame it as a friendly nation. But that's something you can think about, that there are other channels that don't want that, or another nation that has friendly connections with the U.S. that didn't want this to spin out. But then it says, upon learning of the potential attack, they sent messages to U.S. officials. So it seems odd. Like, so maybe the point was the ones they think might be open to the possibility. You know, it's interesting. But then they prevented it. So that seems to at least suggest that there's fractions in our government of people that would be willing to work with the foreign government to stop what Israel might do, which kind of seems to make sense with what we're seeing today. Just all things to consider. So this being the statement, the floated idea. Mint Press News also put it out. Iran has reportedly uncovered an alleged Israeli plot. It has been circulating in a lot of different reports to carry a false flag. And same thing. Upon discovering the scheme, they alerted U.S. officials. So this is what I thought was fascinating. So on the 25th, Batar Worldwide, the group that the ones that literally handpicked Khalil and tweeted at Pambondi, Trump, and the rest of them and said, get Khalil. And they did so without question. And clearly with no real justification, guys. I mean, it's wild. They're the ones that did that. Batar USA is also the group that's been proudly calling for children to be killed, calling for all, literally, in many ways, being openly anti-American. It says, we urge all Jews to evacuate New York City. And this was from the RJC, evacuate New York City immediately. Thank you for your attention on this matter. So at the very least, they were floating the idea, which is irresponsible as hell. Or maybe they knew something. Chief Trumpster says, is this a warning that the Israelis will be conducting a false flag in New York City again? So breaking 911 a few days before that reported developing. Bomb threat reported near the White House. Some nearby buildings evacuated. So exactly the same time frame, but that seems to be somewhat related to this idea. And so maybe there were multiple, or maybe it's not connected at all. I thought that seemed relevant to what we were discussing. Now, on top of that, the thing that stands out to me the most is how this overlaps with the Iran situation, the willingness to be able to do something like that, and the statements that we got from some people in higher levels of power, some just average Zionists online. Let's not forget the statement from an Israeli official when speaking with RT about you will pay for this, right? They're threatening American, or even the idea of the Hamas element overlap of threatening American politicians should they not do what they're supposed to. There's been many openly stated ideas that suggest that they'd be willing to do something like this should the U.S. not do what it's supposed to. So first, as Gen X Girl points out, isn't it crazy how psycho Israelis reacted to Trump telling them to stop bombing? So briefly jumping ahead, because this fits better right now, we're going to get to the fake ceasefire and what you all saw, Trump cussing or Trump saying that we don't know what's going on and Israel broke the ceasefire, saying stop bombing now, you don't know what you're doing. Israeli Zionists lost it about that because they're supremacists in a lot of ways. And the point is that they lashed out. But what I found most telling, what do we keep hearing about Iran? They want death to America and death to, well, and some of them probably do. The reality is, if you listen to most of them, including the government, they make it clear that is about the government. We're talking about the infrastructure, death to the American government, death to not the people of the country, which if you do your due diligence, it's actually very easy to see that most Iranians love Americans. It's actually pretty interesting. So the idea is that death to America is something they use to make you hate Iran, or death to Israel, right? Well, guess what a lot of them were writing online? Death to America. Down with America. Not a joke. So watch this clip that she put together for you, and there's just a few of them. So that's what Trump said. Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. It's just so funny to me how he thinks he can just all caps social put things out. don't raise those oil prices. It's like, who do you think you are? It's kind of embarrassing that he thinks he can, he's trying to, I honestly don't think he's trying. I think he sees himself as this role, this paternalist role. Hey, daddy's home. It's embarrassing, quite frankly, because nobody really listens, to be honest. But here, so he puts that out. Here's how they respond. It says, death to America, death to the West. The first one. And the point is that you're seeing Zionists put this stuff out. Martyr of Israel, it says. This one we'll come out to in a second. It's actually from an account that's supposed to be like a comedian account, so it can be taken with a grain of salt, but I think there's more relevance. I'll show you why. He says, one symbolic bomb in Washington will remind Trump that he is not omnipotent and will restore our national honor. Can you imagine if that was anybody with an Arab-sounding name? Let alone an Iranian, or, in the context of, or first in, like, let's say somebody from Gaza, or somebody from, Palestinian anywhere, or now in the context of like an Iranian with a skin color. Clearly, how these people would react. The Loomers of the world would spin it into some massive story regardless of the facts. This one says, Trump will receive divine assistance if he knows his place and helps Israel. If he speaks to the people of Israel in commands like his progressive predecessors, he will lose his historical role. Yet again, and look, that's an IDF account, guys. You're literally threatening to remove the president of the United States if he doesn't do what Israel wants him to. Yeah, we've been trying to point these things out for a long time to people. This one says, it's right there. Trump beware. War doctrine awaits you. That's like a rabbi, it looks like. This one says, this is in response to that other guy we just read from in regard to just bomb them one time. It's this guy in Hebrew writes, we did it on some Tuesday in September, didn't we? That's what they say. Wow. Yeah, he's talking about 9/11. Yeah, of course you could say he's just making it up. Maybe he's trolling. Consider it all. This person says, written in Hebrew, all the terrorist cells created in the U.S. will surely soon begin to awaken, especially if this whole day isn't one big troll. Oh, okay. So the fact that he's telling Israel to stop bombing is why the Iranian sleeper cells are all going to act out? That sure doesn't make any sense. Unless, of course, they're working for Mossad, then that would make sense. One Iranian bomb in Washington in an open area. Now, even if you're talking about hoping Iran does that, how is this? That's just insane. These are supposed to be the people that are the allies, that are, the ones that you're supposed to be, aligned with under God. I mean, what is going on? And now, to be clear, I'm not even going to say this represents every Zionist perspective, but very clearly does have a similar thread to what you're seeing from the leadership of all of this. This says, Israel Chai, whatever that statement is, you should have written that it's time to activate the pager that Bibi gave Trump. See that? That's written in Hebrew. That golden pager or whatever. Activate the one they gave Trump. This one says, and this is Emily Schrader, someone's in bed with Qatar talking about Donald Trump. You mean Israel? Qatar is, it's an extension of the same dynamic. They're just using the kind of one of these loomer sidesteps to make it sound like that's the accusation. Oh, he's being paid by Qatar. Guys, you can see how Qatar plays the facilitator role for Israel in a lot of this stuff. Says, if Israel theoretically decides to attack America, what should be the opening? The White House? Silicon Valley? Interesting bases? Written in Hebrew. No big deal though, right? I mean, some of these accounts are no joke, guys. I mean, these are people that are stating these things on a semi-regular basis. Or you've got the Randy Fines that are in Congress who literally say these things out loud. Here, True North points out, now all this is sort of in the vein of like manipulations, false flag, kind of overlapping points from the, and same kind of point, like whether or not this might be driven from this kind of mindset, from the Israeli account of the guy we were pointing to, Yair Jacobi, who accuses everyone of being an anti-Semite if you think his joke about bombing Washington, D.C. was serious. The disrespect of POTUS in the United States on full display, she writes, one symbolic bomb in Washington will remind Trump that he's not omnipotent and will restore national honor. Well, now here's what's interesting to me. Check this out. I actually think this was done after the fact. That's based on a lot of the screenshots I'm seeing. Now, what do you notice here? Well, you won't notice until after the fact, but check this out. Here is the current page. Or actually, you know what? This proves it. I'm surprised I didn't catch it the first time. God, these people are so shockingly dishonest. Okay, this is an archive of the page. Highlight it. Here you can see what it says. One symbolic bomb in Washington. Okay, that's what he wrote. Now, what do you know? The account has no other marker, right? Look at what he's updated it to. Now, after protecting the tweets, he's altered it to say parody account. And look, it's not there. It's not there. So why would you do that? Well, because you got far too much attention about the thing that you didn't think people would read in Hebrew, and you locked up your tweets. It's everywhere, guys. Israeli comedian. All tweets here are jokes. How much you want to bet that's probably not on the original account? I can't tell for sure because it's all, I guess you could try to look for the archive, but the bottom line, he put that out and he deleted it and then protected his tweets and added parody account. And the reality is it is a very common thread right now. Very interesting. Now here, this is actually wild to me. Washington Post puts out the article. We already reported on it, where they have recordings and caught Mossad threatening Iranian military that if they don't, turn and start working with Israel, they're going to murder their families and their children. Right? And so Elon Levy, remember this clown who's still out there walking around like he's somehow influential, even though he was one of the earliest casualties of their propaganda war? He got fired, remember, as the propagandist? He says Mossad is phoning Iranian regime generals and warning them to flee the country or be killed. Washington Post had them, so owning it. Think they're correct. The Mossad is going after the Arab. Okay, so what they say in here is important to understand. He said, Mel says, Israelis be like, we would never target innocent civilians, and then share a recording of their Mossad agents threatening to murder the wives and children of Iranian soldiers. It's just, you can't, every day I'm surprised at the stupidity of these people or the desperation. I think that's usually what it comes down to. But I had it lined up. I think I bumped it. You can see it for yourself. But yeah. Do you also want to destroy your wife and child? Multiple times. Like they're open and he's owning it. Shows you who they are. Now, last, Efrat Fengenson makes a really interesting point about this, overlapping this with, the potential of like a false flag in, whether not just the point that potentially in the United States, but just all of this and whether there might be more going on. Now, remember, she was one of the earliest people to really speak out, like the first couple days, if not the first day from after October 7th, as an former IDF intelligence operative. And she spoke up and said, I shouldn't say operative. I mean, she worked for the intelligence side of the IDF, possibly operative. I'm not even saying that as a pro or con. I'm just simply trying to be accurate. I don't think she was like carrying out operations as far as I can remember. She worked in the IDF, but she was in like the intelligence part of it where they monitored and so on, right? And she spoke up, but questioned her like everybody, like we should. She spoke up and called out the very early lies about the timing and the idea they claimed that the guns didn't see these people. Like she said, look, it would go off a cockroach would walk by, right? And very clearly called out the gap and the pre-warning. She believes it was known and either MILOP or PSYOP, MILOP, like basically made it happen on purpose, whatever it is. The game being something either they allowed or something they created. That's her opinion, and I think a lot of evidence backs that up. But now she's talking about the bombing of Iran and Israel for that matter. And she says, under the banner of Build Back Better, which, guys, I'm telling you, is in full effect, left or right. Under the banner of Build Back Better, after the Iranian attacks in Israel, Israel is advancing a plan that could force Israeli citizens to sell their homes to the state if they reject urban renewal plans. Sort of feels similar to Lahaina and, all these different, right through the Israeli-U.S. agenda. Missile damage is being used as a cover for land grabs. How long have I been telling you? Now, this is not to say that there are not real missiles. Obviously, they did. But Iran very clearly focused on certain military locations, as far as I can tell anyway. The argument being made is maybe that was the lie and they were helping, that Iran was part of this, which you should consider. My point, though, is from what I can tell, that's not the case. I think Efrat Fengenson, that's the account here, I think her implication is that this was either lied about or that they bombed themselves using Iron Dome or whatever to justify the direction. But saying simply missile damage, whether organic or after is being used. And she says, here's what's really happening. Finance Minister Smotrich, very dishonest person, and Minister Arbel have unveiled an interministerial task force to lead urban renewal in missile-hit areas. Surprise, surprise. The language is hopeful, the agenda is not, she says. And here's the article. We should actually go through this at a later date. The task force includes the Ministries of Finance, Housing, Justice, Interior, Tax Authority, and Israel Land Authority. Officials openly speak of turning destruction into opportunity. I mean, this rings of all the same concerns we've already had, guys. I just going long on time here. Generally, the point was what I already read. It's just more details about, this is how Build Back Better works in practice: declare an emergency, centralize control, redesign what exists, force compliance, renewed and reward insiders. A wartime strategy is being used to expand the reach of the state into private property and local life. Don't let slogans like urban renewal and resilience distract you from what it really is. See, I really do. She's always seemed to have called out anybody if it goes against. I respect that. And I do believe what she's calling out here is important, even if it is just an organic, like, let's use what Iran did to roll out our Build Back Better agenda in Israel. So here is a different perspective on this. Interesting. Morgan here says, I'm not familiar with the account. How convenient that every residential area, she argues anyway, supposedly hit by Iranian missiles, just happens to be on the books for full-scale urban renewal. Before this is her argument. What are the odds? Entire neighborhoods already previously marked for demolition suddenly struck and cleared like clockwork? Interesting. I think it's very much worth your consideration. And then so she says that's why the footage looks fake and AI generated, and why no one's trying to rescue anyone. They were already evacuated. And there's some coverage of this. But the point is, it's hard to break this down, especially with the overlap of language barrier. She says nothing to see here, just Iran helping out Israeli developers with demolition costs, is what they're arguing anyway. It's hard. It's hard to tell, whether this is like counter meta level propaganda, but the interesting part of this is I wouldn't put past the governments ever working together for a larger agenda, whether Iran or Israel or anybody else. As much as that may seem unlikely, it's worth consideration. But on top of that, whether Israel is simply manufacturing this using what happened for their benefit, which is what I expect from the US and Israel and the UK historically, right? So just consider this point and whether that might be part of it. Now, Arya lists what we understand to be the targets, which different than what we're being told in the context of that part of the conversation, the buildings and areas marked for renewal, right? She says, infographic of Iranian strikes on Israeli assets, strategic assets Iran targeted. And from what we can tell, this is accurate. So my point, though, is unless there's others that weren't included, or these are lies, or however you're going to look at it, this seems to be the point. And my gut tells me that they just like every past event we've seen, they targeted what were specifically military targets. They did not bomb civilians. In reverse, they literally did the opposite. And the point is, Mossad headquarters, which a lot of these they tried to hide, which does appear to be a big deal. The arguments where they killed one of their main, if not the main guy in Mossad, but I haven't seen that flesh out yet. But all sorts of different points. Now, for example, I would argue that bombing the airport, that's a crime regardless. But when you're in the midst of a war where Israel's bombing all of your civilian areas, at what point do those lines become no longer necessary? From the perspective of them, my perspective is that regardless, you should maintain what you believe is right so you don't become just like them. So it's criticized regardless. The point, though, is you can see all the different military targets in their perspective. So consider that. I think it's important to wonder, and there's a graphic showing you all the different locations. You consider whether or not there's more to the story. It's always an important thing to do. So let's finish with the general situation of what, up until when we started, what is currently going on with Israel and Iran. Now, we covered the Iran responding, which let's not forget that this last back and forth, Israel just started bombing Iran because they were seemingly getting close to some kind of an agreement. And they backed away and they said, why would we keep dealing with you while Iran's or Israel's bombing us? Right. And then the US joined in, bombed their nuclear locations. And all the evidence continues to show that they did not do what they claim, which is sort of embarrassing. We'll get to in a second how they immediately went after the leaker and just over the top coverage of why the leaker is a problem instead of focusing on that we just got caught lying. Right. And the point, though, is I think that's part of the manufacture, that the reality is they warned them. It turns out Iran warned, so Qatar knew. They in Iraq, Trump removed his people. Qatar removed their people. They removed their important things, and Iran responded. And before that, it seems they were warned because they removed the material and it was all very public. They had literally signaled that the B-2 bombers were being sent, guys. Everybody knew what was happening. So then for them to pretend like this was some kind of massive thing or vice versa, it's just silly. But that's usually what you get. The reality is, I think this was manufactured to give Trump the illusion of a win and to allow Israel to continue to argue that we can't stop because they simply moved the material, which is now what Lindsey Graham is saying and all the rest. It's what we thought about the time, and it does seem to be fleshing out. There's the show from the 23rd if you want to watch it. Now, the White House put out on the 23rd, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed on. This is what Trump said, and they're just posting it. Fully agreed on between Israel and Iran. It will be a complete and total ceasefire. So it's just embarrassing is the way he thinks he can just shout this out there, and that's what's going to become the reality. It didn't happen. Apparently, at the time, even Iran, they were like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Now, we'll get to the point where it does seem to have been in somewhat of taken effect, but at the time, it wasn't even close to that. Oh, isn't that stupid? He's wearing a hat that says Trump was right about everything. God, it's such a dumb little, it's like a Jones-Trump meme that's just flatly not true. It's hilarious. So, doth protest too much and they keep telling you how right they are about everything. Well, because they're not right about everything. But here he says, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed. In approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down, which, by the way, was weird because they didn't wait 6 hours and he already criticized people, but then after that, they still kept bombing. And as far as I can tell, Israel has bombed Iran at least twice since then, 25th, 26th. I'll show you what I think. But the point is, and of course, he tries to create the 12-day. Do you not know that there's already a name for the 12-day war? It's just so funny to me. What should be called this. And now all the followers are trying to make that the name. People will probably not call it that out of pushback. It's so funny how the games we all play. There's no reason to call it a 12-day war. It's a bombing exchange. And the reality is that's been going on for a long time. I think they wanted this to feel like something that he stopped. Even though it's really stupid to frame you being peace anything or the person who solved something that you started. Whether you and Israel together or independently, the point is you guys allowed this, created this, so you're not the ones solving anything, right? You start a problem and you stop it, you're back to square one. You didn't gain anything. You actually lost because of the process. But on the 23rd, drop site news. Israeli strikes hit Tehran despite Trump's ceasefire announcement. Now that's both before the 6 hour and after, just to be clear. And it's been over 40 minutes since Trump announced the ceasefire to begin in 6 hours. So the point was, they were nonstop bombing, and he didn't like that, I think, even though it hadn't been the 6 hours. And yes, they did bomb after that, but it goes over the different points. The point is they were aggressively bombing. Now, Glenn points out is Iranian officials, this is the 23rd, tell CNN that they had not received or agreed to any ceasefire, which does appear to be kind of the consistent case here, that they were told about this by Trump saying that. And they say, we don't know. The ceasefire was fake news. And it says, I guess we'll find out for sure one or the other in about 6 hours. And then even Professor Morandi said, no ceasefire, fake news. Then this was the update as of the about 6 p.m. that day. Iranian sources have confirmed, and I believe it's just because they decided to take up the offer because it was there. Because, I mean, the idea is you have to understand how often Iran in this circumstance has continued to show itself to be the one showing restraint. In this case, at this point, it's obvious to see who came out losing in all this. The lie about what they thought they got, the many very well, not articulated, but the many important sites that were hit by Iran. There's video evidence of, and the fact that he lied about it. So it kind of quickly showed you that I think maybe Israel became starkly aware, shockingly aware that they weren't prepared for this, or that the U.S. wasn't going to do as much as I don't know what it was. But clearly at this point, Iran probably said, okay, good, do it. Because at this point, we feel like we have the upper hand. That's my opinion. But then it says that we'll expect it to go into effect soon. According to one source, Israel will stop firing at 3:30 a.m. Jerusalem time. So way past the supposed 6 hour mark, with Iran anticipated to follow suit. So what it appears to be is that Trump threw out a number that nobody followed, which probably what bothered him. And then because it was public, decided to make use of it anyway. That's kind of what I'm getting from it, but you can decide. Glenn simply adds, Iranian sources tell Al Jazeera that there is, in fact, a ceasefire that will go into effect soon. The next day, now I think this was the post from before, but it simply says, Trump tweeted, or Truth Social, Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. That's what all the Zionists didn't like. Bring your pilots home now, Trump says. Just funny. It just seems so childish the way he was, and then Sam Husseini picking up on the same thing, which, just to be clear as always, when you have to all capitals stand on a soapbox and pound your chest, that's usually the sign of the weakest person in the room. That's just my personal opinion, but I do think there's precedent for that. You don't need to scream, I'm strong when you're strong. You're just strong, right? And he responds the same way. He says, Israel, only drop those bombs on Gaza or Lebanon or the West Bank or Syria or Yemen. But for now, don't drop them on Iran. Here's some more billions, but I'm a tough guy, Donald Trump. It's perfect. It's just ridiculous to pretend like that's in any way anything but him just, I'm exactly how to frame it, but not peace is the best way to put it. So High Impact Flicks cover this as well. We recently had a great interview with Brian. It's Brian Young from High Impact Flicks. Make sure you follow him. He simply says, Trump claims he's upset with Israel for unloading after we made the deal. He said, Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs. He's like, the likes of which I've never seen, always hyperbolic. I'm not happy with Israel. That seems very contrived, in my honest opinion. It does not feel like that seems like kind of what was supposed to be said, but me, I'm skeptical. Either way you look at it, it clearly did not go. I'm going to play the clip where he cusses. That is the one reason why I feel like Trump was a little bit off. He felt rattled to me. And I think it's because he maybe doesn't realize that. I think he needs to feel like he's in control, my personal opinion. Syrian Girl says, Trump now, this is the 24th, I'm not happy with Israel. I'm not sure Iran broke the ceasefire. That's an interesting thing to say. Israel violated the ceasefire. As soon as I made the deal, they grabbed, because as far as I could tell, Iran did not. That's important. That Israel kept bombing, and as far as I could tell, Iran was not constantly bombing Israel, especially after the time when it took effect, and I think Israel has continued to. But it says, I'm not happy with them. I'm really unhappy that Israel is attacking for one rocket that was a mistake that didn't land. Israel's been fighting so long, so hard that they don't know when the F they're doing. They don't know what the F they're doing. I'll play that in a second. That's not usual for him. Candace Owens, again, hear me out. What if we went for regime change in Israel? See, that's why I get the sense this is not just about making a point, and it makes me very, very nervous. No. If you're going to argue for regime change anywhere, then frankly, you're missing the point. But I'm going to consider that it could just be her trying to make a point with that, but it worries me. Here's the clip.
Yeah, I do.
She probably couldn't hear it. It was so low. And I'll let you guys turn the volume, but I'll stop talking because it seems like his volume is low too. But the idea that her framing of it was, did Iran break the ceasefire? Is it Iran? When the evidence you have is clearly one-sided, but they want to make it about Iran. It's so lazy how they do that. But then try and hear his response.
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too. Are you questioning if Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. When I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Wow. And that's not true, by the way. Israel's been fighting a lot of people for its entire existence. The idea that Iran has been at a defensive stance towards what they're doing this entire time. And that's backed up by the evidence, guys. The insinuations can only go so far. You can literally prove what Israel's done all over with the U.S. help and what U.S. has done in their name. There's someone, I'm sorry I jumped in there. I forgot. I would. But the point.
They say, okay, now you have 12 hours. You don't go out in the first hour.
They do it every single time. They did it with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. They do it in Syria, guys. They do it every time. So I don't know whether he doesn't know that. Because I got to be honest, he genuinely feels frustrated right there to me. But maybe that's acting. He is an actor, right?
Or just drop everything you have on him. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning.
Okay, and that's the last part. The way he ends is that they don't know what the F they're doing and that Iran's always been fighting them. I don't believe that, not really. in the sense of like the facts on the ground, as opposed to like it's some ideological battle against Jews. That's what they're really aiming at. And it's simply not true in my opinion, but and you can decide for yourselves. Yeah, I just lost it. It was that Israel went on bombing the next day, which is true, guys. I mean, I think the evidence is very clear, which we'll go over right now. So David Icke captions what Jake Shields says, which is, I'm glad Trump isn't pushing for regime change, which is like, what? I mean, I guess not stating, we should, but he did though, right? He didn't, it's not politically correct to call it that, but shouldn't we if, and for him, just because he's not going, let's overtake the country, they rarely state out loud exactly what they want you to think they're doing. So I think it's frustrating that even people like Jake are going to go, good thing he's not doing that. Guys, that's what they're doing. That's what the whole thing is about. That should be clear by now. But he goes, but can someone explain to me why MAGA is acting like Trump is a genius for stopping a war he started the day before? Excellent question. It's funny to me that people, David Icke nails it. He says, it's called desperation, Jake. I agree. Few people want to, it's hard to see such a powerful thing as desperate, but I'm starting to think like, I've been saying it for a long time. I think that's where they are. And maybe not because they think they're going to go to jail, but because they're losing power and they see it. They see it slipping through the fingers like sand. And I don't think they know what to do about it in a lot of ways. No matter what a cult leader does, he writes, however appalling, he's always right, for he cannot be wrong. Members of a cult are mesmerized, transfixed by the God figure, and critical thinking is blasphemy. We see that pretty clearly. And that's left and right. He says, do that even mildly, and you are not in the cult anymore. And we've seen that in recent days. The cult leader is divine. That's all they need to know or want to know. Sad, but true. It's where we are. We saw that with Cat Turd more than anybody, it seems. I will always stand by Trump, and we now see anybody challenging him as not really America first. It's quite the opposite, in fact. DC Drano comes out on the 23rd and says, looks like the people who trusted Trump were right again. It's just narrative control. The Luigi says, I genuinely don't know what this could possibly be in reference to. What win are you claiming here? Being Israel's BITCH, our bases getting bombed, starting World War III, oil prices skyrocketing. Which of these W are you celebrating? Which is kind of the opposite side, which is also partly not true. Well, what's funny to me is that this idea, like battling about that somehow what Trump did was saving everything. And we just talked about that point. If he starts this, at best, you bring it back to square one, which is not a win. It's you just solve the problem you created. But on top of that, when he says, well, here's his response. He goes, oil prices are falling and there's no World War III. Where are you getting your info? I mean, oil prices went up a bit to 85 at the most I saw, and then went back. It's really not that much of a fluctuation. The price actually changed the most, not where he's pointing to right now. At this time, it was still quite high. So you guys are just grifting out there, trying to lie about everything happening. And the idea that there's no World War III, same point they made before. If you want to look at the metrics of what that looks like from World War II forward, or what we use to define it as, you can argue we've been in that every day since that, or really, Syria and many examples of multinational war fronts. But that's not what they're trying to highlight it as, right? It's about some kind of watershed moment that they can point to and say, we are now in the world. That's what Jones uses it as. Even when he claimed we were in World War III, it became, hope this doesn't go to worldwide through a nuclear war, or like just up, doubling down on World War III, if that's possible. The bottom line, guys, is that you can see that we're in a very clear escalatory path, and it's, yes, going in that direction. But to make this some kind of defining factor and say Trump just saved us from that, based on what metric? Are you not currently involved in multiple fronts of war? Like, these people are either that stupid or that completely blinded toward their agenda. And Arsen Atrovsky, the fake human rights lawyer in Israel, this is what he had to say about Trump's statement. When they don't know what the F they're doing. He goes, dear Mr. President, you've been an unwavering friend of Israel, but you can always hear that coming. Your strikes against Iran's nuclear sites were critical, except they didn't appear to be. But there is no, I repeat, no moral equivalence between the unprovoked acts of Iran, including their ceasefire violation and attack this morning, which killed at least 4 people, and Israel's right to self-defense. No. The idea that, first of all, the idea that you can ever continue to say there's no moral, first of all, what do you mean a moral equivalence? At what point do morality play a part in legal situations? Did they break the law or not? Like a human rights lawyer, as always, proves that he has no idea what he's talking about, or these things mean nothing to him in the context of his fight for Zionism. The idea is, yes, there's an obvious equivalence under the law. Iran does something that violates international law, it's a problem. If Israel does, it's a problem. The problem is you're trying to create a moral superiority, which means that if Israel does it, they're better, so it doesn't matter. I mean, it's so insulting what you're saying right there. And the idea that with Hamas or Israel, if they break the law, they should be held accountable, right? They'll say yes when it comes to Hamas, not with Israel, because they're not morally. That's what he's trying to get at. Then he says the unprovoked, there's no equivalent between the unprovoked acts of Iran. In which ones are we talking about here? Unprovoked? You mean the ones they did after you fired on them first, which the whole world witnessed because Trump was in the middle of a supposed ceasefire talk? So you're going to claim that their response to your bombing is unprovoked attacks? He's probably got to say yes because of some no moral equivalency. When they bomb, it's for freedom, and it's insane. And it says, and the attack this morning. So they're trying to claim that Iran attacked Israel this morning, despite the evidence, and even Trump saying that he thinks Israel fired a missile. These people are broken. He says, we understand you're frustrated. So are we. We want to be out of these shelters. And I feel so bad for arsons hiding in the idea that they're pretending like they're always under threat in these shelters where nothing ever. How about the people that are being starved to death as you say that? Or the children you're cheering on dying with the bombs you're reporting? The idea that you're trying to make yourself the victim as you're committing genocide is disgusting. As always, the worst of the worst. It says, but this moment demands also moral clarity and honesty. Iran is the aggressor here. Can you believe that? They violated the ceasefire. Are you serious? So you bomb them out of nowhere and they respond, and then that's just, they're unprovoked. But then you guys continue to violate it, even according to Trump, and you try to make it about Iran violating the ceasefire that they didn't even know it existed until you guys pointed it out. Israel's defending our people. Can you believe that? Why? Because of your allegation about a bomb that everybody knows isn't true? They're desperate. Well, the reality is, based on all the evidence, including from the U.S. information, including from leaked information, including from satellite imagery, the U.S. strikes failed to destroy their nuclear sites. Now, I kind of think this was the way it was supposed to go, because now they can go, well, it didn't work out. We have to keep going, which is what you're already getting. But realize that the intelligence does show, despite how Hegseth and Trump keep lying about it, that they didn't actually achieve what they claimed they did. Daniel McAdams points the obvious out, that anyone with a brain knew the moment the open source satellite images, or I shouldn't say it like that, open source. The point was, I did quotes for some reason. I wasn't even thinking that when I said it, but open source satellite images came out that they didn't wreck anything except U.S. taxpayers' budget. The point is, Witkoff in this clip is talking about the leak and how they're lying. Instead of acknowledging that the information that we have, whether leak or not, proves that you guys were all lying to us and still are. But you see, they just want to muscle the conversation through a controlled platform like Fox or CNN into, we have to go after the leak instead of what the leak shows. Just like WikiLeaks and so many other examples.
About with this leaked intel report.
Well, it goes without saying that leaking that type of information, whatever the information, whatever side it comes out on, is outrageous. It's treasonous. So it ought to be investigated. And
oh, now it's treasonous to expose the lie of the government? I thought that's when whistleblowers were protected, when they expose a crime. Yeah, they actually are. There's actually laws in the books that claim or that state very clearly that if you're exposing a criminal act, then you're protected as a whistleblower. But they don't care. They don't care about Assange. They don't care about Snowden or Reality Winner or, whatever you think about them. Psyops or not. Like endless examples of people who are being whistleblowers who simply get arrested. Or, any number of terrible things that we've seen. But just remember that, guys. As the point is, they're lying about U.S. actions or lying about where their military is going. You might want to stretch it into being a crime. But either way, my point is that they lied about what they did. The information proves they lied about a massive, let's be real. This was a massive war crime, seeing as how there was no congressional approval. So yeah, so the whistleblower would be protected because you're exposing a crime.
And whoever did it, whoever's responsible for it, should be held accountable. It could hurt lives in the future. Leaking is a completely unacceptable thing. But let me give you, because I've read all the damage assessment reports from not just our government, but from other governments, and I'm not going to,
meaning Israel, by the way,
get into anything that's top secret. But let me tell you for sure what happened here. There are three distinct facilities in Iran that we were concerned with. Isfahan, which is a conversion facility. You cannot weaponize unless you have what's called the conversion process at the beginning of enrichment.
Now, the bottom line is he just goes on to try to push the larger manipulation of what they claim is happening, despite the evidence from even the U.S. government. But as Daniel McAdams says, anyone with a brain knew the moment the open source satellite images came out that they didn't wreck anything. And of course, Libs of TikTok is pushing the intelligent government lie, right? Or the intelligence government lie. You know, as the rebels fighting the deep state, they just love to repeat what the government says these days, or what the intelligence says, or what the FBI says, because that's really the rebels today, right? Special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Woodcock, says whoever leaked the intel is treason. But of course, if it was the other way around and it was a Republican leaking about Biden doing the exact same thing, oh God, they'd be screaming revolution, 1976. Jones lead the way. You know, the typical nonsense we see. Sal the Agris points out, Hegseth, what a clown, he says. This is just embarrassing. Now, remember, we know the image is clear. Now they're trying to make this witch hunt about the leak instead of highlighting what the leak shows. He says yesterday, this is what Sal says about him, and I'll play the clip. He says, imagine bombing a country, risking World War III in the process, missing all your targets, and then blaming it on the fact that people don't like you. Could you call that like the woke right, kind of?
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump.
The same thing you guys do in reverse. You know, pot, kettle, and all that.
Because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have
Despite the facts, right? Despite the evidence, the leaks, the satellite imagery. They're all the same, guys. Left and right, they're all the same, which is the point. Anybody who sees through it all can be honest enough to call it out. But the left, the right, the fact that they all will go after the other side regardless of it, because they're all children. The idea, though, is what's being hidden through these allegations. That's what they do. The you're the left and you're the right are the facts, which are that we can see that they didn't do that. But instead, it's because you don't like us, as he was saying.
to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take...
Yeah, so maybe it's not true. So you're telling me a journalist shouldn't follow up on a maybe they lied, but instead they should ignore it because, well, I don't want to hate Trump? Guys, this is as dumb as saying the WikiLeaks file, you shouldn't look at it. You should look to us to tell you what it says. They're all the same thing.
Half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it.
Yeah, leaked and otherwise true information, but, you know, we'll bury that with the other statements.
Spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful.
Has nothing to do with the pilots. That's how they're trying to emotionally manipulate. And let's be clear. Everyone out there, I agree in the sense that they're all dishonest and all would lie no matter what. Like a matter of policy. It's not the same, though, as saying what he's saying, that the information about the bombings is false. As always, if you just yell, Democrats are bad, half the room is going to agree with whatever you say next.
How many stories have been written about how hard it is to, I don't know, fly a plane for 36 hours? Has MSNBC done that story? Has Fox?
How is that relevant to anything we're talking about? Is that a news story, or is that a fluff propaganda piece that you want them to write and are complaining they don't do enough propaganda for you?
Have we done the story how hard that is? Have we done it 2 or 3 times so that American people understand? How about how difficult it is to shoot a drone from an F?
Okay, so what are you trying to suggest? That we don't understand how difficult it is, therefore we should accept that it failed, but then pretend it did? Or did pretend that it was a success? Like, I almost wonder if they don't really think through what they're saying here. Like, is this like an emotional tirade that he didn't plan? I mean, your argument can't be that because it's difficult and you understand that we should ignore that they failed, or rather lie and pretend they succeeded. That's what the implication is right now.
15 or 16 or F-22 or F-35, or what it's like to man a Patriot battery, or how hard it is to refuel midair, giving the American people an...
You know what also? He doesn't have the first clue about any of these things, unless he read about them. As far as I understand, this guy pretends a lot, but doesn't have the experience to back it up. And I mean, not in every possible circumstance, but like most of people in this cabinet, or most people in government, by the way, there are a lot of grandstanders and a lot of fronts.
Understanding of how complex and sophisticated this mission really was. There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that because of the hatred of this press corps are undermined because people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible.
Remember, it wasn't successful. Like that has come out pretty strongly right now. Like the facts are clear. Not only satellite imagery, but different reports. And he's doing this while he knows that people have that in front of them, scolding you for not propagandizing the right way.
And folks in this room are privy to that information because of the proximity here in the Pentagon. It's an important responsibility. And time and time again, classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad. And what's really happening is you're undermining the success of incredible B-2 pilots.
All right, it's all there. So it's all the pilots. We care about their feelings now instead of facts. Now, look, I'm not going to argue for a second. These people are all trying, let's put it this way. Any president, any reporter, if you're simply leaking information because you're trying to, spurn them, then yeah, that's you're ridiculous. And if that falls under the category of a crime because of the info, you should be held accountable. None of that is the same conversation of whether or not the information is already shown, whether illegal or not, that they're lying to you. That's my point I'm trying to make. This massive grandstanding emotional ploy is all to get you to ignore the fact that the evidence he's trying to downplay shows you that they're lying to you.
And incredible F-35 pilots, and incredible refuelers, and incredible air defenders who...
Yeah, I mean, you get the point. It just goes on and on and on. And I agree. What a clown. What a Zionist clown. So Bricks News says Israeli Prime Minister, and this video's gone around, officially declares victory, which I laughed so hard. I mean, this is how stupid this all is. So not only did you clearly come out as the, lesser in the situation, to the point to where you had to basically pretend like Israel, to a lot of people's perspectives, Israel lost a lot and realized very quickly that they could not continue this. And so they then pushed forward this illusion of this fake ceasefire. And then stands up and on the 24th, we won! We did it! We stopped them forever, except already telling us that they didn't stop it, or the evidence showing that they did in the first place, or patching together because of Lindsey Graham and the rest that, they secretly moved it, probably because of Trump or somebody in the U.S. government, but they did it, so we can't stop going after them. But we still won in a way, though, right? It's just crazy. David Icke says, you wanted out because you got more than you bargained for. Interceptor missiles were running out. The Iron Dome wasn't so iron, like I keep telling you. The lies this bloke and his fellow liar and psychopath in the White House are spinning about victory when it's really about stop it quick, it's out of hand, predictable, but still pathetic. Here is an important overlap from the Mina Unleashed account where it's highlighting some financial aspects. As we've actually seen this quite a bit over the last 2 years or so. The reality of how often they, I guess the U.S. will supplement everything and don't have the finances, the people, the personnel, the training. And so the Israeli government just deleted this document, which you can find. Before its removal, it revealed 41,651 compensation claims had been filed by Israeli citizens for war-related damages as of June 25th, 2025. It excluded the most recent Iranian strikes and omitted numerous frontline casualties. Yet, even in its partial state, it happened to expose the underlying reason, as they read it anyway, for Israel's abrupt acceptance of the ceasefire with Iran, or the faking that it was, fiscal exhaustion. The war did not end because it was won, if you want to even call it that. The idea that this was some kind of a war is frustrating, other than the larger construct of this all being an ongoing war. It says it paused because the state could no longer finance its continuation. Very interesting thought. Now, my point in that ongoing war point is to say, look, if that's the case, then we're not out of anything. This is not stopping. It's been going on forever. They're assassinating people over the years. The Soleimani, the scientists. This is all part of the same effort, guys. This is just a momentary diversion to stop their hemorrhaging, it seems. But it goes on to list all the different things. So I think this is important to consider. And I do think the information is showing out in a lot of ways. The way they're acting, the fact that they need other countries to basically continue this, I think it's very relevant. Now, the Cradle points out a few examples. This is Iran struck the crown jewel of science in Israel. The Weizmann Institute, that is the brain center for the nuclear military dominance. So it says training Dimona scientists, feeding Unit 8200, developing AI, powering cyber and surveillance warfare. When they bomb this and arguably dismantle it, which is what you're not going to hear, but the Mossad headquarters, like a lot of very major things. I showed you earlier. Yeah, I showed it earlier in the show. All the major locations that they bombed. that it's possible that they literally handicapped them to a large degree to where this is why they had to stop and pretend like they won, because Iran came up on the very large upper hand. Now, whether that's the case or not, just the back and forth, whether or not they got these targets still arguably shows they had the upper hand. This, I think, is important. The AI nuclear direction, it very well, caused a very serious blow. Now, here's what the Sky News corporate media had to report about the so-called ceasefire and what the Israeli minister had to say about it.
Minister Israel Katz says he's instructed the military to prepare an enforcement plan, as they're describing it, against Iran following the 12-day air war. They've put this statement out in the past few moments, saying the plan includes maintaining Israel's air superiority, preventing nuclear advancement and missile production, and responses to Iran for supporting terrorist activities against Israel.
Oh, okay. So basically, nothing's going to change. Israel's going to continue the war in every way possible except stating out loud they're doing so, and maybe momentarily not bombing. Nothing new, guys. It's just like with Gaza. We're going to maintain airspeed. Like they are, like, in what world do you argue you can maintain, occupy their airspace, control it even, as they're claiming, and then act like you're not at some kind of war? I mean, it's just so embarrassing what they're doing. So that is not going to spin out in their favor. I can promise you that. This is not even close to over. I can promise you that too. Greg Stoker says Israel's about to violate a ceasefire agreement for the 963rd time since January. This is from today. New York Times. Israel suggests it could strike Iran again to counter new threats. Oh, you mean like a preemptive strike, like last time? Preemptive self-defense? I mean, the argument could be used forever. Because you claim they're evil boogeyman, we can bomb whenever we want and claim we thought they were going to bomb us first. That's an unprovoked attack, guys, with a certain flair. So Greg's simply pointing out the obvious, that they're going to continue to do that because that's what they've done. And even floating it publicly, guys. The Cradle points out the Israeli defense minister is openly threatening to restart the war with Iran. That's today. I mean, but if you listen to all the moron partisans we pointed to today, they're all giving you something different. Yay, we fought World War III, we stopped World War III, Trump's the peace president. And once this begins, they'll spin some other lie that Trump wants them to say. That's what's been going on ever since. Now, Trump even said this today, which is just ridiculous, showing you that if you were in Iran's shoes, why would you ever act like these people can be taken seriously?
If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you.
To a level that concerns you. Who cares about the law? Who cares about whether every country in the world has a legal right to do all these things, both nuclear weapon and civilian? If Trump doesn't like it, that's what she's asking.
Level that concerns you. Would you consider bombing the country again? If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you, would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely.
Sure, without question, absolutely. Okay, so bottom line, if they continue to do what you already know they're doing, which is the civilian program, and your own evidence shows they're not seeking a bomb, yeah, absolutely. So is anybody confused? What he just said is already literally happening. So all they really said was, we're going to pause right now, but we already plan to go back to this because of everything that we already told you and everything that's already happening, none of which is actually a crime or, a violation of even the JCPOA. I mean, it's just insulting everywhere you look, guys. This stuff is obvious. And yet you got a bunch of sycophants out there screaming whatever they tell you to say. The truth is right in front of you. Disclosed TV, Trump will bomb Iran again if the country enriches uranium to a level that concerns him, which was now is the point. That's already the case. Even though it was not a violation, even though it's not a crime, even though it's part of the agreement within the JCPOA, who cares? Trump doesn't like it. So apparently Trump is the arbiter of the world. But breaking news, Israel's defense minister says Iran will be asked to hand over its highly enriched uranium. It's one more step to the next, guys. That is not something they should have to do. Despite all the hyperbolic screaming, all of the evidence shows you that this is simply for their civilian program like every government in the world has. And again, for the 14th time, even if they were seeking a weapon, it makes sense by everything that's happening. And why is it different for any of these other countries versus Iran? Because of their narrative. I mean, look at what Saudi Arabia is doing, and it arguably has already sought out and is achieving these things through the U.S. and Israel. Or the idea that there's plenty of other countries that they support that are wildly despotic, but they don't care. Now, this one is 23rd. But I think we already briefly pointed at this. This is showing you what Sarah Abdallah reported, which this is just to trigger the conversation. This was widely reported, and we discussed it in the last show. Iran announces that it's ending all cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, you have to understand, guys, even though both Gabbard, DNI, the U.S. government of this administration, and the IAEA of this current time, as well as the past administration in both counts, and before that, said the same. They are not seeking a nuclear weapon. Tulsi Gabbard's on the record, despite her trying to claim otherwise, and you can look at the video for yourself. So, but the point is, the reason they're not working with this is because they're already recognizing how it's being used against them and always has. And I mean, the real point is, I think nobody doesn't say it down there, but they've complied. They've complied and been checked and researched and complied and been proven to be right. And it complied and proven to be right. And they get bombed. And they continue to check and prove, and they're not breaking the law, and they get bombed. What's the point of this mechanism if the only dynamic is for them to call them liars? If the actual International Atomic Energy Agency is confirming that they're not, and they get bombed anyway, and they don't care, then what's the point? It's a tool of coercion is what it really comes down to. So they're going to pull away from it, which I wouldn't even, it doesn't surprise me, because every moment, that's what she says right here. Years of inspections, 0 nukes, still bombed and threatened. Israel, no inspections, no national non-proliferation treaty, hundreds of nuclear warheads, no issue from Israel. So when they pull out of this, it makes sense for a lot of reasons, but it will be used to call them out for it. But just recognize how obvious it is that it's being used against them. And on top of that, it was just proven that Palantir's, was it Gotham? I forget what the name of it was. I think Gotham's the police one. Palantir has a database that's being used by these groups, and that information has been handed over to Israel. And that's about internal information that's not Israel, they're using it against them. So it's obvious to see what's happening here. Now, Patrick Henningsen simply points out the obvious point that we made over the years, which whenever I say that, by the way, that's not meant to diminish his point. I agree, and I'm glad he pointed to it. The point is to show that this is an important thing that has been around for a long time, which is the obvious comparison. Trump and Netanyahu, Iran is the bully of the Middle East, right? Well, this meme's been around for a long time, and it's only gotten worse today. Countries attacked by bombing, sabotage, or attempted government overthrow since World War II. Well, you'll be shocked to find out that you can list a ton of them on the side of the USA and Israel, by the way. And then over on Iran's side, it's completely blank. I mean, podcast, it's blank. And then China, Syria, Korea, China, Iran, Guatemala, Tibet, Indonesia, Cuba, on and on. Yep. But let's make sure, let's frame one as the bully. Lastly, here's June 25th. Now, again, you can't confirm because it's not real. There's no, there's minimal coverage, but it's what they do every single time. And there's been multiple reports, but I'll include it so you can see it. Unknown explosions in Tehran on the 25th. And there people from in Iran's conversation or argument. This was Israel. Nobody cares about it unless it's pushed through from their, the certain aspects. But global reports that an explosion was reported in the Janat Abad neighborhood of Tehran on the 25th. Opposition sources claim it was an attack, while Iranian state media described it as a gas explosion. So who knows? State media in Iran is susceptible. Also, maybe they don't want it to be spun out while they think there's a ceasefire. I mean, who knows? Or it very well could be a lie. Or something that is, an internal force trying to work for Israel that's not necessarily Israel, that they don't want to be used. It's lots of ways to look at it. The reality is, during the so-called ceasefire on the 25th and the 26th, Iran was bombed. This one, they say a fire broke out after an explosion was heard in an apartment in Tehran. Cause unknown. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible these were random things, but there have been multiple reports of different back and forth, and I think this is relevant to what we continue to see. Even Mario Nawfal, propagandist, my point is that this guy tends to toe these lines when they're useful for their operation. And so he comes out and goes, an explosion has struck an apartment in Tehran. Rumors suggest a drone may have been involved. Unverified reports claim that a senior nuclear scientist was killed. See, so what do you mean? That's coming from Israel, guys. If that's the report you're getting, that's what that's from. A group has claimed responsibility, but speculation is spreading. Here is Lindsey Graham. Guess what he's saying? Their facilities are obliterated today, but you can reconstitute them. You see, he's playing another narrative, adding a third level to it. No, we stopped them because we're tough and strong, and we bombed all their buildings, and it's complete. Don't listen to the leaks. But they can reconstitute it all. Like, imagine pretending they just spent the last 50 years doing that, but they can do it all tomorrow. Well, the reality is in other contexts, they've all already argued that, well, the material was moved. That's why. But it goes, the real question is, have we obliterated the desire to have a nuclear weapon? Oh, so now we're ideologically moving the goalposts to not just that they have the possibility to, but just the desire. We can't allow them to succeed. We can't allow them to live if they seek the things that we all have. Lindsey Graham is a monster. I mean, he's one of the most belligerent in this whole conversation. Abby Martin, in the conversation of the nuclear scientists they claim they might have killed, let's not forget, 17 scientists have been executed by Israel. There's no legal reality for why that makes sense, whether they work with nuclear research that you think is wrong or not. These are scientists. They're murdering them with their families. As and point of fact, Sanatosi points out, the family of an Iranian scientist killed in an Israeli war on Iran. Everyone marked with a heart in this photo was killed when Israel bombed the scientist's family home. That's one of the earliest bombs you saw. They claimed they bombed military targets. They bombed an apartment building, as Professor Morandi pointed out. How are we okay with this today? How are you out there allowing this to continue by ignoring because of politics? Abby Martin says, imagine if Iran hunted down every top Israeli nuclear scientist and killed them along with their families. The outrage would fuel immediate NATO intervention. But who cares when they bomb family homes in Tehran? Now, to end, let's not forget, Netanyahu on Friday, let's just, Netanyahu's, hold on, did I mix these up? Yeah, I think so. First, I wanted to show you this. So the point is, Israel's currently bombing Lebanon, which is not secret. Even Israel takes claim for it, but says the IDF hits Hezbollah terrorist targets, but blames them for the death of the innocent people in the area. Right? So Israel bombs Lebanon, and they just go, but their fault that innocent civilians died. But I don't even know why they just chose to give a narrative, seeing as though no one seems to care that they violated the Lebanon ceasefire every single day it existed, according to Craig Murray on the ground and everybody else that was there. But they're bombing Lebanon is the point. So at the moment that they get pulled away from Iran, they start bombing other places. Multi-front war. Because I think this is just, what's the right word? It's hatred, vitriol, just sinister action, just frustrated because of your impotence over here. So you just execute people in Lebanon or continue to starve and execute people in Gaza. That's what's actually happening. My point is that this is just ongoing war to distract from, in a lot of ways, what Netanyahu is being accused of, but plenty of other ways just because it's what their ideology demands. Here is Qatar. As Al McLeod points out, Israel's currently bombing 5 countries, but some are already planning for the next one. Qatar, Israel's next real enemy, says the Times of Israel. Or Pakistan. Geopolitics, a detailed foreign affairs report citing U.S. intelligence sources claims Pakistan is developing a nuclear-capable ICBM with range to hit the U.S. Trump is reportedly extremely concerned. You realize there's every other country in the world with those same capabilities has that same thing. Now, I'm not saying it's something that you should just ignore, but the idea that you can somehow create some ideological or cultural line about who can and can't is just obviously about control. The timing of this leak sure is interesting. It says, is Pakistan next on the list? I think it's all going this direction, guys. They're recognizing they can do whatever they want because clearly the last 2 years, despite what you all see, at least makes them feel that way. And they're lining up their next opponents, guys, in the midst of all this. Now, one of the things I wanted to end with was this exact point. This is Jerusalem Post. Judges on Friday denied Netanyahu's request to cancel 2 weeks of testimony hearings, which will occur on Monday beginning at 11:30 after they viewed Netanyahu's schedule. There's multiple indictments. This guy is moments away from going to prison for the rest of his life. And the reason he continues to be out is because of the wars he's involved in. That's why I think they need to constantly be involved with this because it gains him some kind of support. Now I'll end with articles discussing that. Here's Haaretz, 2024. Netanyahu hoped for war would keep him off the witness stand. The judges didn't take the bait. This goes back even further. Is time running out for Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu? Israel's longest-serving prime minister faces the difficult task of overcoming opposition both domestically and abroad. He discusses the fact that he's about to go to prison. And if he's at war, it seems to stave it off a little bit farther. It's such a common conversation. It's actually like an open debate amongst Israelis. The guy will start war, will fake bombs from Gaza just to keep the idea that he's the war president. Isn't that what Trump I mean, think about when the whole Tesla thing happened and both Trump and Netanyahu came out and made weird advertisements about Teslas. I mean, clearly these people are in lockstep with the way this is all going. Now, all of a sudden, this guy's really about to go to prison like it's almost been many times, but the wars have kept him out. And what does Trump start saying? Oh, he's a wartime president. How dare they? Why do you think that is? It's all right in front of you. All of it. Please continue to fight for this stuff, guys. Highlight the truth. Call it out. No matter how inconvenient, no matter how politically partisan. It's just so wildly important that we start calling this stuff out. Not just because I think most people already see a lot of this, but just to show others that it is okay to call out, to be able to have an open conversation about this. Like, and as always, solving any problem, the most important thing to start with is acknowledging that you have one. And there are plenty of people out there that haven't even really come to terms with what this is. So thank you for continuing to support this platform, for continuing to support the truth, for finding the courage to call it out. As always, if you support this platform, there's plenty of ways to support the, financially support us down below. All the links, donation platforms. We do this for free. We do this because we believe in it. Put all the work in. Sometimes, this goes on for days of work and research, organizing certain categories. I've got multiple windows open with other things I'm working on. And some days I'll sit down and spend 13 hours organizing the show for what we're going to talk about that day and putting out 4 hours today of content. I do this because I believe in it and I believe in you, and I'm going to do it regardless. But if you want to see this continue and grow and continue to put out more content and more writing and more of everything we do, show us down below. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.